across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. Now, lots to come this afternoon. Universal Credit has hit that record 8.3 million, with 48% of that number not required to actually seek work. This has been fueled by long-term sickness at 2.8 million. Unemployment is up 5%, 180,000 more on payroll jobs lost after Reeves' first budget. I mean, the list goes on. This is miserable. What are all those people doing that not only are not working, but don't have to look for work? Also this afternoon, Justice Minister David Lammy has admitted that there are three prisoners still on the run after 91 were wrongly released since April. The Shadow Justice Minister, Robert Jenrick, has accused him of endangering the public, dubbing them Lammy's lags. Oh, I love that. And slams the blunders after a sex offender was mistakenly freed just days after Lammy boasted of the strongest checks ever. This is an absolute royal mess over there at the Justice Department. And Calamity Lammy is the man in charge. And a militant Christian nationalist wave seems to be rising in the UK, with one bishop, Kieran Dewar, holding mass baptisms and also holding a Unite the Kingdom sermon. He's blending evangelism and forthright views on immigration and Islam. He's going to be on with us live a little later. You won't want to be missing that. Details to come, everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. What is behind people not having to look for work? What's the detail there? Maybe somebody can enlighten us and we'll all go, OK, well, that makes sense. That's fine. What do we do about it? It's a kind of rinse and repeat of the same headline. We find ourselves in this place on a frighteningly regular basis. The welfare system in this country is about to explode. The total cost is rising by the hour, and it's not looking as if it's going to recover anytime soon. Where is the point that we have to say we simply cannot afford this? We simply don't have the money. It is completely, unequivocally, and demonstrably unsustainable. Just look at some of these numbers. They are beyond disturbing. It doesn't matter where you sit, left wing, right wing, somewhere in the middle. Can anyone with a straight face tell me that any of this is sustainable? 1 million more people are claiming Britain's main out-of-work benefit without the requirement to look for a job than a year ago. So just let that bit settle. This is 1 million more than this time last year, and no requirement to even look for a job. The number of people on universal credit without the need to search for work has exceeded 4 million for the first time. I mean, this is an absolute dent. It was not so much a dent in the armour of Keir Starmer. It's a furnace-burning session of the armour of Keir Starmer. Now, ministers are saying, oh, it's because we switched some people from an older benefit to they've been phased out, so it's made the numbers look worse. But the figures do underline the scale of the challenge facing this government as it tries to reverse inactivity in our economy, and there's a lot of it. Listen to this, though. If these figures are 100% genuine cases, so all of those people who are not just out of work but have no requirement to look for, if they're all genuine, we have a massive problem. If some of them are people playing the system, we have a massive problem. Either way, whatever way you choose to look at this, whatever end of the telescope you might peer, we have a huge, immovable problem. And this is going to get bigger and bigger. And they're talking about tinkering around with a tax rise here and maybe a reshaping of a benefit over there. I mean, this is just cobblers. This is unsustainable. I mean, there's some interesting figures in this country. If you add up all the welfare that is spent across the planet, 7% of it is in the UK. Did you know that? And yet we're 1% of the population. It was just an interesting stat for you. 0344 499 1000. What is the reason so many people can't work? What is the specific reason? What is happening there? Have we got lots of... Are we in a kind of state of collective psychological meltdown? I'm assuming in all of this that the mental health component is front and centre of the reason why so many people are not just not working, but have no requirement to look for a job. So that, in its worst form, is a lifetime of never having to look for a job. And the figures are rising. 1 million more people than a year ago. It doesn't get any more damning. And even if you acknowledge, even if you say, OK, it's 1 million more people, yes, we have a massive mental health issue, or people are getting cancer, or people's got a dodgy ticker, whatever the reason is, it's a flipping. Even if you are generous and more charitable to these figures, it's still a problem. And that's the issue that we're facing. And of course, as we go through the years with this government and the next incoming government, I mean, good luck, we're trying to sort this thing out. And what is the answer, by the way? How do you address that as a government? Do you go, I tell you what we're going to do, of those 1 million people, we don't believe any of you, so we're not going to give you any money? Nothing. OK, so how does that then work? A lot of those people have got kids, families, bills to pay. So are they out on the streets? Are they just destitute, have nothing at all? And there's the problem. There is the absolute Gordian knot of this story. I mean, that dilemma has been there forever for ministers. It's just now in real sharp focus. And there's almost a sense of there's no way around this, is there? Other than to keep paying people who have found themselves in a position where they not only do not work, they will no longer have to look for work. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Chloe Dobbs is back with us. Chloe, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to see you. Well, let's start with this one. We've got universal credit hitting a record 8.3 million, 48% not required to seek work. I mean, this is absolutely huge, and of course it comes after the last budget, which we think affected many of the stats, particularly around employment, and it comes just weeks before the next budget on this one. Let's have a listen, though, to Kemi Badenoch. Earlier this year, she was questioning the Prime Minister on this very issue of sickness benefit. Here's what happened.
Sickness benefits are set to rise to £100 billion because of their mess. They cannot now reduce it. They can't reduce it because after last night's humiliating U-turn, we know he cannot control his MPs. They're cheering now, but you signed the amendment. You signed the amendment. Over 100 people signed that reasoned amendment until the bill was completely gutted. He said that he would take the difficult decisions, but isn't the reality that he is too weak to get anything done?
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell them what they did to the welfare system. They broke it. They broke it. And it's the same as the NHS. What did they do? They broke it. Same as the economy. What did they do? They broke it. They broke everything that they touched. And now she describes the broken system that we are trying to fix. What did she do? She voted against fixing the system that they broke. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, and spell that out, they voted last night for the system that is keeping 1 million young people not learning or earning. That is a disgrace of their system. They voted for a system where we have 3 million people out of work on ill health, and they voted for that system. We're fixing it. We're clearing up the mess that they left, just like we're clearing up the NHS and the economy.
Well, of course, they palpably are not clearing any of this stuff up because all of these situations are getting worse. I mean, we're clearing up the NHS, the economy. These are just platitudes that they wheel out. I'm fed up with this kind of guff from politicians. He's not alone in that, but he's got a degree in it, that's for sure.
Well, there's actually been a leaked document showing that Labour have, in their forecasts, given up on trying to reduce the welfare bill. They've gone in their planning with the projections of the welfare bill going up and up and up and up. They're not even trying to reduce the rate at which it's going to go up. They've accepted, after that huge rebellion where we had, as we saw in that clip there, Rachel Reeves on the verge of tears and then crying in the Commons. I mean, it's crazy that with their huge majority that they couldn't even shave $5 billion off this. And in that sense, I do feel for Rachel Reeves in that you've got a very tough job if you can't cut down at all because of your backbench MPs. This completely even if you think it's morally right, we have to accept that pragmatically this is not sustainable. 1 million more people in the past year signed off as not needing to look for work whilst on benefits.
Oh, if you follow that pattern to the next election, then there's another 4 million people.
I know, it's crazy, and I think it was last week, Ian, we were looking at this report done. When you consider cost to the NHS, lack of taxes these people will be paying if they're signed off, and so on, it's predicted to be more like 250 billion a year is the real cost of this, which is completely and utterly insane. And they haven't really attempted to do proper reform of the system to, for example, give people a chance to try work, and if it doesn't work, go back onto the benefits, because that's one of the main reasons why people end up trapped in this system. When they tried to cut 5 billion off that bill, one of the reasons why some people voted against it is because it wasn't really thought through as proper reform. She just said, I need to find 5 billion more quid, how can I shift the numbers around to make it happen? And they said, okay, well, you change this score on the PIP system and that will do it. Wasn't really good enough.
Doesn't really work, does it? And the problem with this, even if you were generous, as I was saying in that intro, Chloe, and said like all of these people are genuinely ill or have a problem, then there's still an issue. So whichever way you slice it, there is an issue here. It's unsustainable, right? I mean, there's no way you could carry on in a low taxation society with a rising welfare bill. And remember, this is just one department of government. There's NHS and education, all defence, all the others. I mean, that simply cannot happen. Mathematically, an 8-year-old could work that out. What happens if you add 1 million people to the welfare budget every year? There's going to be a point when you can't afford to pay it.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we've just had the figures come out showing that we have got the highest unemployment since COVID. And the reality is that this is not something that they can just blame the Tories for. This is down to Rachel Reeves, those national insurance hikes, those minimum wage hikes, and the economy just not growing very much at all. So on top of all these people that have been signed off on benefits as not needing to look for work, you've also got a load of people who have lost their jobs, you know, places that, for example, hire a load of people on minimum wage and have had a huge minimum wage hike and national insurance hike. They've looked and they've said, well, I've got to fire a load of people to make this work.
There's 180,000 people since that budget.
Yeah, and now, so you combine that together, you've got all of these people who are now not contributing to the Treasury in taxes from work. So I'm sure another big black hole will be emerging. No doubt she'll blame, what will she blame this time? We've had Brexit, we've had Trump, we've had Putin, we've had George Osborne.
Yeah, who's going to be next?
I just thought that press conference where she stood there for 45 minutes and blamed everybody but herself for the situation was hilarious.
Has she mentioned Thatcher yet?
I'm sure she will at some point.
Although they have a curious habit of pretending they kind of like admired Margaret Thatcher, don't they? Even if they're on the left, you know, she was a strong woman, the first female prime, all that old guff they wheel
Yeah, they
out.
went through a bit of a phase of that.
Yeah.
But didn't Starmer take out the portrait of Margaret Thatcher from Number 10 when he
Yes, he
went
did, didn't he? Yeah,
So...
which is a curious thing to do. It's just an act of blatant sexism, frankly. Let's move. We are asking the question: what is specifically the reason behind extra people not being people who physically can't go to work? You don't have to look for work. What is the reason behind people not having to look for work? Also this, I read this at first, at least 3 more pensioners mistakenly freed from jail. Of course, it's prisoners, not pensioners. That was my bad. I do quite like the idea of a few old duffers, a couple of octogenarians running around the place wondering what just happened. But this, of course, is David Lammy admitting that at least 3 prisoners still on the run after 91 were wrongly released since April, with 1 missing since last December, for goodness sake. So that's just shy of a year. Robert Jenrick has accused him of endangering the public, dubbing them Lammy's lags. Great phrase. Let's have a listen to the Justice Secretary speaking in the Commons yesterday. Here he is.
We understand that there are 3 mistakenly released prisoners currently lawfully at large. Their prison records show none of these are convicted sex offenders. I have been informed, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon that HMPPS are investigating a further case of a potential release in error on the 3rd of November who may still be at large.
What does he mean, may still be at large? They either know or they don't know. Have they caught him or not caught him? What's up with the man?
Yeah, and Jenrick laid into him for that. I mean, he said, have you not tried just taking a look in his cell and seeing if he's there or not? I mean, I thought the way that Jenrick grilled him yesterday, I mean, it was just one of the most brutal grillings in the Commons that I have ever seen.
It's an open goal, isn't it? But yeah, make the most of it when you can.
Yeah, but one thing that Robert Jenrick included in his grilling is a load of quotes from other people in the Labour Party, Labour MPs and ministers, their anonymous quotes of what they've apparently said about Lammy's handling of the situation. Look, you can give Lammy a little bit of benefit of the doubt in that he hasn't been Justice Secretary for very long, but what we can all agree on is that his handling of last week when he was in for PMQs was just a total shambles. I mean, he started off by forgetting to put his poppy on, which wasn't a good start. That started a scandal in and of itself. And then he was asked 5 times, are there any other migrant sex offenders who are out on the loose? He wouldn't answer, and then we find out towards the end of PMQs that actually he knew 11 a.m. the day, 1 p.m. the day before, that this guy from Wandsworth was on the loose, who is an Algerian with sex offences to his name, and the people accusing him of misleading. It was a disaster.
It was an absolute disaster.
This man is just... He's Calamity Lammy.
He is Calamity Lammy. It's a great phrase. Lammy's lags, Calamity Lammy. We've got it all going on here. And the thing is, even if... I mean, I saw somebody the other day saying, well, you know, under the Tories, there were also prisoners released in error and stuff like that.
But it's gone up hugely.
Regardless, if you're in charge at the time, it is your problem.
Yes.
You've got to deal with it, and you've got to be able to instill some confidence in your position as the Justice Secretary. And David Lammy is just looking more woeful by the day. I mean, he wasn't great to start with, for God's sake. You know, just sort of some gobby guy from North London who, you know, just sat on the back benches, more left-wing than an Albanian Keep Left sign, and did it for years. Now suddenly the Deputy Prime Minister. It's one of those bizarre journeys. I know, it's a bit odd.
It just shows how little talent there is in the Labour Party. That they were scraping the barrel. The best they could find was David Lammy.
He still is the best viral clip ever, though, isn't he, when he's talking... You remember that clip from a few years ago when he's talking about you never see a police officer around here?
That is brilliant.
I mean, you literally, genuinely believe that was... If that was released today, you'd assume it was AI, wouldn't you? Go, well, that's obviously not real.
Well, after seeing that, I was a bit concerned that when Hadish Kabatu went missing, we got an update whilst he was on the loose saying David Lammy is believed to be helping the Met Police to find the guy, and I thought, he can't even spot a police officer who's right behind him. He's not exactly going to be any good at a manhunt.
What is going on? 0344 499 1000. Why are people not looking for work? There is that question we're throwing out. We'll talk about Tim Davie in a second. He's fighting back against BBC enemies, as he sees it. And Keir Starmer preparing to defend leadership from, quote, feral Labour MPs. Who's got it in for Sir Keir? Sorry, let me rephrase that. Who hasn't got it in for Sir Keir? We'll look at that in just a bit as well. Lines are open. Chloe's still with us. This is Talk.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 23 minutes after 1 o'clock. Chloe Dobbs is with us. There's loads to talk about at this end. Let's move to this story. Tim Davie, remember him? He's the fellow that used to run the BBC, has blamed enemies of the BBC for stoking the bias scandal. Meanwhile, Donald Trump spoke to Fox News last night about the ongoing story regarding him suing the BBC for $1 billion. This is after the doctored speech on the Panorama programme. Let's have a listen to what Mr. Trump had to say.
Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, why not? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it, and their top echelon.
Director General and the CEO
This
both
is
resigned.
within one of our great allies. You know, this is supposedly our great ally, BBC. The government has a chunk of that one, I guess, but that's a pretty sad event. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical, and they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people.
Yeah, and on he goes. He's going to sue them. I mean, it's probably not going to come to that. They'll issue an apology of some kind. I mean, I said this yesterday. They did, if they wanted, if the whole point of the Panorama documentary was, I mean, bearing in mind he was impeached for this, for goodness sake. It's not like the BBC just made it up. But what they did was, and I'm going to say this every day for the rest of my life. I can't believe someone put that alleged montage together, which was essentially a rewording of his speech. And the argument is, yeah, but he kind of said the same thing over a period of an hour. No, you don't get away with that. They doctored a speech and they re-edited it to make it sound far more dramatic than anything he'd said.
I mean, clear as day. Now, of course, I mean, you'll know here we're always playing short clips all the time where we have to clip things up because we can't play someone a 1 hour long clip, right?
Correct.
But this was not cutting something up to make it succinct. This was very clearly turning something completely placid into a call for violence. And that was completely abhorrent. And so I understand why Trump says that he is going to sue the BBC. $1 billion, I mean, that's huge. That would bankrupt them. Do I want it to come to that? No.
No, because we're going to pay for it if it does.
Exactly. What I would like this to be is a big turning point for the BBC where they actually realise we need to do proper impartial journalism, else we are toast. I think they know there's a good chance that the licence fee is going to be scrapped by reform, especially after this, because people have really lost faith in them. And look, you've seen how Trump negotiates, like how he does with tariffs, where in order to force someone to do what he wants, he will threaten a really huge tariff, right? And so here he's threatened a huge amount of money to force the BBC's hand, and he's got 3 demands. It's not just an apology. It also is that they have to remove any other content on their platforms that makes false accusations about him. So I don't know if he's got a team going through right now finding any article where they've maybe called him far right or a fascist. I don't know if there are any that say that, but there might be, and they'll have to take down a load of stuff potentially. And it also says he needs to be appropriately compensated in those 3 demands. So it sounds like regardless of whether he goes against he goes ahead with suing them, he wants some sort of cash out of them. I wouldn't mind if they have, as much as I understand the licence fee payers have to pay for this, I wouldn't mind if they do have to pay some sort of sum to Donald Trump that forces them to learn their lesson and learn they can't get away with this.
If you get a job on, I know I'm going over old ground here, but I feel so strongly about this. If you get a job on Panorama, you'd imagine, so you've got the BBC newsroom and it's got lots of journalists in it, and the very best are selected for a job on Panorama. You'd apply for it. You'd have to be at the top of your game to get a job on that, because it's investigative. And yes, they have done amazing work. Everybody knows that. You can list it over the decades of some of the stories they've broke, some of the things they've exposed. They've done great stuff. However, you only need to make one error, and there's been a couple actually on Panorama, but on this particular one error to sit there and question how this could have physically happened. Now, we now know that the Panorama edit it was made by an independent company called October Films, but they didn't actually edit it. The editing was done in-house, which sort of makes it even worse, because their slight get out was, well, yeah, we should have checked the independent, well, we didn't. But it was done in-house, and the October Films say they were unaware of the splicing until the Telegraph exposed this about a week ago. I mean, it's beyond belief. I'm not hearing anything about the people that edit it. Who are those people? You don't do that for a living without somebody going, isn't it a bit odd that we're cutting this up like this? Somebody in that room, and there would have been at least 3, probably more, would have gone, can we get away with this? Somebody would have said that, I guarantee.
Yeah, well, look, they tried with the Gaza documentary that had to be pulled. They tried to blame the production company, and they may try to do the same here. But we know how this works. Even if there is a production company that does the bulk of the work, all of the final edit, even if the company, the production company does the editing, that all has to go through a huge room of people at the BBC who sign off on everything. They have lawyers check out. I mean, how this got through is absolutely crazy. It just shows how much of a woke bubble they live in at the BBC, that they thought that that is acceptable, and that comes across as impartial in some way. I mean, the Telegraph have done fantastic work here, because it's not just been on the Trump thing, it's been huge revelations about BBC Arabic, and then just yesterday, again, more revelations about them constantly taking the Stonewall view when it comes to trans and burying evidence that would suggest that, well, a woman is a woman, as those of us in the common sense world know. So there's a lot for the BBC to answer for, especially when you have had people like Michael Prescott going to bosses at the BBC and showing them, this is what's going on, this is what you need to do, and they're just burying it. It's not like they can say, oh, I didn't know about it, right?
Let's move to this story. Final one. We'll have to be brief on this one, Chloe. Wes Streeting has accused Number 10 of self-destruction briefing wars. He's also denied any post-budget leadership bids and has pledged loyalty to the party. Let's have a listen to what he said this morning on the BBC.
I'm not challenging the Prime Minister. I'm not standing against him. I'm not doing any of the things that some silly briefers said overnight. As for pressure, I'll be honest, this silly briefing's water off a duck's back. We've seen this before against other Cabinet colleagues. I think our Deputy Lucy Powell, was absolutely right about that toxic culture that needs to change. I don't think these people are speaking for the Prime Minister. I don't think this is the sort of behaviour he expects from people who work for him and for the government. So on all that, I'm not worried.
Well, what's interesting about this briefing didn't come from a newspaper. It wasn't something that somebody's just said on social media, you know, the kind of claptrap you get on there. This actually came from Number 10.
Yeah, well, they're trying to distance themselves from it now. If it is the case that Wes Streeting wasn't plotting anything, they've essentially created their own scandal, which is absolutely hilarious. But one thing that is interesting is Guido revealed that yesterday a Wes for Leader website was created. Was that Wes's team, or was that just some random fan and Wes Streeting has got nothing to do with it?
Is he the man to take over if Starmer went?
I mean, I think most of us on the right say of all the people in the cabinet, the one person we think has a few brain cells is Wes Streeting. So.
Well, he's quite accessible, so he can talk. You know, he was talking this morning on an interview about celebrity traitors and making kind of analogies about. Can't imagine Starmer or who's the opposition leader, Kemi Baden. Can't imagine them kind of going there in that very casual, accessible way. I don't think he would make any difference.
And he's better, he's better at the media rounds.
But would it make any difference to how people vote? I doubt it.
I don't know. I mean, a problem with him as a candidate is, again, he seems very London bubble.
Yeah.
not
That's very true.
in touch with the working classes in the north of the country, which is a problem for Labour at the moment.
He is a working class background boy. I mean, he's the first in his family to go to Oxbridge. He's got all of that going on, but, you know, it doesn't come across like that, does it?
Yeah.
Chloe, thank you. Great to have you on. There's Chloe Dobbs with us on the programme. Over to you. Anything you've heard there, we're up for all of that. Plus that big question, why are people not looking for work? What has gone wrong with our brains, our minds in this country? Are we genuinely all getting ill? Or is there something else behind this? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This comes from Johnny. He said, Johnny's in Carlisle. He says, I'm one of the out of work on benefits with no need to look for work. I am a multiple sclerosis sufferer and a British Army veteran. I worked in the fitness industry until last Christmas when life circumstances and an enforced relocation forced me to stop working. What am I doing though? I'm looking for work. I'm also looking at going back to college next year. I can't understand how anybody can just sit around. This last year has been the longest of my life. If anyone in Carlisle has any office-based admin or management jobs going, I'd love to hear from them. You don't get it. If you don't ask, you don't get. I get that, and Johnny, thank you for that, and I'm sorry to hear about the situation you found yourself in. I'm absolutely enthused and delighted when somebody says, I've got some real jip going on here and life's a bit bloody tough. But you know what? I'm still going to get out there and look. And yet Johnny is one of the kind of people in this story that you would say, yep, that's exactly where my tax pounds should go, to help people who are nobody is going to, no one, this isn't about having a pop at somebody who's ill or somebody who's got, having a psychological breakdown, a disability. Most people are quite proud that that is where your tax pounds go, to people who need help. When you see these numbers, however, that universal credit has hit 8.3 million, 48% of whom are not required to seek work, you do begin to think, well, so all of those people all in the position that Johnny is in, or anyone in a similar position who has a permanent injury or a disability or a psychological breakdown of some kind of genuine, real, tough mental health challenges? If that is the case, then I get it. But we still have a problem in terms of how sustainable the welfare system is. Let's firstly get a word from Anna Leach, Chief Economist at the Institute of Directors. Anna, good afternoon to you. And just on that point, you know, there's always that argument, well, hang on a second, this is either the government, like, just not keeping their eye on the ball, or it's some people who are trying it on, or we have a collective problem with illness in this country. Whichever one you choose, we still have a problem in sustaining this level of spending.
I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, the OBR project that incapacity disability spend is going to reach £100 billion by 2030. Yeah. By way of context, that's about the same as we're spending on debt interest at the moment. But it's a substantial sum. And I think, you know, given where we are at the moment, we're heading for a big fiscal hole and a big tax rising budget. There's obviously a lot of questions about the affordability of that trajectory for benefit spending. And you know, to like the rising population, anything else going on either.
Yeah. Somebody said sort of an analogous point here. Somebody said to me ages ago about public sector pensions. And in 1948, when all the whole welfare situation kicked off, Berridge and Bevan and all the rest of it, somebody whispered into the ear of somebody at the Cabinet Office and said, you do realise that this public sector pension thing is not going to be sustainable in 50 years. And the answer was, well, let them worry about it in 50 years' time. And similarly, I would imagine, with welfare spending, conversations probably going back donkey's years were happening. Let them worry about it in years to come. We're now in that place, I sense, Anna, where somebody somewhere has got to make it. You can't kick this can down the road any longer.
I mean, exactly. Particularly when things are tight and growth is low, there just isn't the same sort of money to spread around when claims are already running at such a high level. So, you know, yes, we are kind of at that point now where something very much has got to give.
Is there an answer to it? I mean, when you sit around with, you know, fellow economists and directors and the like, is anybody in the room, you know, when you're sitting there around those nice tables having a powwow about financial matters and the future, does anyone go, here's what we should be doing? And everyone in the room goes, yes, we should.
I have to say, I haven't been in rooms which have come to quite such a strong conclusion. But
that's a shame. I was hoping we'd have some breaking news here.
That would be great. But the likes of the OBR and the Institute for Fiscal Studies have been looking at this in quite a lot of detail. So the OBR sort of break down the drivers of benefit spend quite nicely. They talk about it reflecting the health of the working age population, the state of the labour market and the wider economy, and the structure and operation of the benefit system itself. And this is really crucial here because actually, when you look at the rise in claims, it's a minority of the recent inflows, which is due to more initial claims. A lot of it is due to a much higher approvals process than we had before. And the IFS put this down to changes in the way we assess claims. Yes. And there was a big change post-pandemic. A lot of those claims moved online, so it's a bit harder to pick up fraudulent claims when you're not in the room with people. Yeah, yeah. Of course, we've got AI nowadays, which probably makes it easier to frame your claim correctly and tick all the boxes, which is great if you're a genuine claimant, you have less of a job. It's not great if you're a fraudulent claimant for the system. So those are some of the issues that the geeks that I hang out with. Yeah.
I love that expression. But of course, as I said at the beginning of this, Anna, whichever way you slice it, there is still a problem there. And, you know, if everybody was 100% bona fide, genuinely either disabled or too sick, mental health, physical health, whatever it happened to be, it still leaves us in this sort of irredeemable mess of having to pay for this. And you talked about those projected figures by the end of this decade. And of course, if you wanted to go further, I'd imagine those figures are even more devastating.
I mean, they are, and particularly actually, if you look at particular components, like the OBR looked at the impact of the triple lock, for example, which has already been significantly more expensive than it was expected to be. And of course, it was introduced for very good reasons. Pensioner poverty was a significant concern in the UK. Pensioner incomes were very low relative to the average worker, and there was a need to accelerate growth in pensioner incomes. It is worth looking at where they are now relative to the average to average pay to assess what is affordable and fair on both sides of the equation for pensioners and people paying for those pensions going forward. And it's the same for benefit claims. It interacts as well with the performance of the NHS, of course. Many claimants have got complex claims.
Yeah. Listen, Anna, great to speak. We will, I'm sure, speak again, certainly between now and 2029. That's Anna Leach, Chief Economist at the Institute of Directors. So in many respects, it's a sort of very simple picture to understand. We're stuffed. But the complexities around this and the kind of world we're going to be living in, and how we pay for it, how we afford it going forward. Let's speak with Tina McKenzie, MBE, Chair of Policy and Advocacy at the Federation of Small Businesses. Good afternoon to you, Tina. Nice to have you with us. And one area of this whole welfare system that also jumped out in the latest news is the unemployment rate, which went up yesterday, got 180,000 people who now aren't working post that last budget. And many saying, well, that's not a coincidence. Look what happened in the last budget. National insurance, which went on to small businesses. And of course, people who run small businesses are working people, despite the promise to not tax working people. It was a curious way of playing with words, I suppose, from the government. But, there's always, for every action, there's a reaction, right? And this is one of them.
Yeah, for sure. And we were really clear about that and have been to every single DBT minister, every chancellor and prime minister, that if you continue to make it harder for especially small businesses who hire 65% of the people in the country, if you make it harder for them to hire people and more expensive, then less people will be hired. And importantly, if we have this 9 million people now that are economically inactive, which is really the elephant in the room in terms of the cost, the billions that it costs to service that we don't actually have, then what small businesses are saying, and they're the ones most likely to help those people into jobs, they're saying they're less likely to hire those people now. Yeah. They're less likely to take a chance on people. And we were really clear about that if you bring in more regulation, if you make it harder for small businesses and more costly, they won't hire the people. And that's a problem. We won't get the growth, but ultimately more people are going to be economically inactive.
Yeah, 100%. And of course, this all chimes with other rising costs, energy being a big one as well. And I know that's largely dependent on the kind of company somebody runs. And I hate to be running a dry cleaners or a laundrette right now, but you know what I mean. I mean, it's those areas that are also having a devastating effect on small business.
Completely. And when you talk to them, they talk, and let's just say that they're very optimistic people. Entrepreneurs in this country are very positive, and they're positive about their businesses, they're positive about their country, and they're positive about their community impact, and they want to help in their local community. Hence why they're more likely to employ somebody who has a disability, somebody who hasn't been in work, somebody maybe who has a criminal record. They're more likely to help those people in their communities. But I think they're being pushed so far that they're stopping investing and stopping hiring people in a lot of cases. And the situation is that the cost of business rates, the cost of energy, even the cost of finance, some of the business owners are telling us at the Federation that they're paying more than 20% interest rates on some finance that they're trying to get, because of inaccessibility for those small businesses to get the finance. So there's bigger questions to be asked around what are we doing around litigating that? Are we spending as much time litigating those big institutions, those big organisations, even the organisations like HMRC? Yep. Are we spending as much time looking at what we can do better there to simplify things, to make it easier for the small businesses in the country to work their businesses, to spend less days doing tax returns that are complex and really difficult for them, in order that we spend more days on business to get better productivity? But to me, it's a no-brainer. It's really simple. If you've 9 million people who are not contributing, and you're probably having to pay a lot of money for a lot of those people, then simply the more of those people you get into work that can work and want to work, then the better it's going to be for economic growth.
Well, yeah, my 11-year-old could work that out, and that's the bit that I can't understand. There's people paid triple six-figure salaries that are meant to be in charge of this, and they don't seem to be able to kind of just call out the very obvious. And yet here we are in a curious situation where we've got many people who are not working at all, and we've also got a situation where many of them have not even got to look for work.
I guess the government are stuck, though, in between the politics that's restricting them and doing the right thing by the economy. And what small business owners have been ringing up and saying to me is, we're not the cash cow for the Treasury when it runs dry. They need to stop layering these costs on us to do all the spending they want to do. They've got to find other ways to get the economic growth. And a really simple thing would be to say, okay, if you're a small business and they want to help small businesses, what about, a bit like the Youth Guarantee Scheme, which is a really good thing, what about saying that anybody who's been unemployed and that is economically inactive on benefits for more than a year, that if you take them into your payroll in your small business, you won't have to pay tax on them?
Yeah, that would still be cheaper, right? That would still be cheaper than what is happening at the moment.
And morally, it's the right thing to do to get people back to work who want to be back to work.
God, Tina, it's almost like you know what you're talking about, isn't it? Isn't it strange when you bang your head against a brick wall and think, I've got the answer for you. I've at least got part of it. But somehow it seems impenetrable to people over there at the ministry.
I will say this. I talk to government a lot. I've just come from a meeting with the departments as well. There are a lot of people that really do get this. There are a lot of people that are trying to do the right thing. And I think it's that age-old problem, Ian, of politics versus, the economy and doing the right thing.
It's 100% that, yeah. All of these decisions aren't made in a vacuum, are they? They're made, people agree with them notionally, and then they go, but what about the politics of it? What is it going to, how does this look like, and we know that when Labour tried to just put a halt to the rise in welfare payments, they were shouted down and they had to get rid of it. So we know how that pans out. Bang on, Tina. Great to have you on with us. Thank you. Tina McKenzie, MBE, Chair and Policy Advocacy of the Federation of Small Businesses. Of course, they know their way around this story because they are the backbone of our economy. Let's get some comments on this. Michael in Hertfordshire. Michael, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I just don't know how many more mistakes this government can make. I mean, there's so many people on benefits. Some obviously are genuine, but they're talking about putting up the minimum child allowances.
Yes, you can't make this up, can you?
It's a joke. They're becoming the Monty Python of politics.
Yeah.
It's just getting ridiculous. And everybody can see it except them. I just don't understand it. I mean, last time they were in power, they nearly bankrupt the country. People got short memories.
Well, George Osborne, on the two-child benefit cap thing, because that's when this came in, he said it would mean families and benefits face the same, those on benefits face the same financial choice about having kids as those supporting themselves solely through work. So it wasn't discriminating it. It was saying that you've got to, if you've already got 3 kids and you fall on hard times, I understand that you might be grumpy about this, but if you decide to have kids, it's not like everybody who's working and not on benefits is some rich old duffer. I mean, this is about personal responsibility, which seems to have gone out the window.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. And can I just say something on immigration? Is that allowed?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't understand why no one's come up with the idea like Australia did. They had an island where they put all the illegal immigrants in the island and they were sorted out from the island without coming into the country.
Correct.
Now, this has 2 benefits. One, it will cut out crime. It will cut out putting people in the hotels. And it will also put people off coming to the country. We have enough islands around Great Britain where this could
You would think so. And do you know the interesting fact about it as well, Michael? Even those that were granted leave to stay still never got to Australia. That they were posted into accommodation on some of those. So even the legit cases never went to Australia, and that's why their immigration problems pretty much stopped overnight. Great call, Michael. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. Pete the Mole says, how can youngsters get a job when Reeves' national insurance rise on employers has cut thousands of job positions? Because they didn't think it through. They needed the money. They didn't know where to get it from. Polly says, I think we have given up. I'm a waspy, age 66 and a half. Still working, never claimed a penny from the state, worked from the age of 16, brought up a family while doing work I could. No backbone or resilience in the current climate. A total reset is needed in this government and welfare. Absolutely right. It is a total reset that is needed. I don't know how you start it. I'd like your suggestions on that as well. 0344 499 1000.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
It is Talk 0344 499 1000. Let's get back to it. Mark's in Lincolnshire. What have you got for us, Mark? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. What have I got for you? The people not having to look for work thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm in that situation. I've not, I was fully signed off by the DWP about a year ago. Been in that actual situation for about 3 years. I think it's just such a nuanced conversation, because whenever you start talking about people's health, it can be so complex and so complicated that a lot of people can always make a case for why they can't look for work, for whatever the reason may be. I mean, for me, myself, it's very much a physical thing. I have a severe balance problem. When I say severe, I mean it's severe. I'm quite a stickler for doing my housework, which used to take an hour and a half or so. Yeah. It now takes me 6 hours, just to do the same amount, because I just literally can't do things like I used to, because I'm constantly feeling, off balance, shall we say.
Well, you're somebody with a genuine issue, right? I mean, nobody, I don't think, begrudges somebody in that situation of struggling to go to work.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it's like I said to the lady I spoke to originally. For me, it's a lot of the problem that I have is NHS related. I've waited about 18 months just to try and get to see the right ENT specialist, because that's what they feel is likely causing my issue. The fact that, I do have an uncommon heart condition as well, which compounds problems. I'm sure. Makes things quite difficult, because one of the problems that I tend to have with all of this, people always talk about mental health and stuff. And for some reason, funny enough, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, because I can't figure out why it is my body still reacts the same way that it does 3 years on. Where I have a really, really bad spell with my balance, and my body will just physically go into panic mode. So that will release, a lot of adrenaline, which then impacts my heart condition.
Of course,
that's when I end up, the only option that I have at that point, NHS-wise, is I have to get an ambulance, because I have no ability to tell whether I'm actually, whether it's a genuine heart incident or whether it isn't. Sure. So it's really, really difficult, Ian.
But nobody. Again, you're what would be called, a genuine situation of somebody who would massively struggle to get into the workplace for obvious reasons, which you've just outlined. And I don't think anybody would. I said a second ago, I think most people who pay into a system because they are more than happy that people like you can be looked after or helped.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. I've always been incredibly grateful for it. It's why I don't bother claiming PIP, because I don't need it. The full health element of universal credit provides for me sufficiently. I have I don't have a massively comfortable life, because I was going to say to you, one of the reasons you can tell I am genuine is because I desperately want to go to work, because I can't afford the stuff I'd like to buy. but I'm not going to claim extra off the state in order to be able to buy it, which I could do.
I get it. I know. Even though you're calling us from Barbados, aren't you, Mark, secretly? I do understand that. So, listen, great to have you on, Mark. Good luck with everything as well. Fabulous call from Mark in Lincolnshire to kick us off on this. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. A million more people are not just not in work. They don't have to seek work. What is going on? Have we got collective illness? A genuine physical or psychological malaise? What is happening out there? Lines are open. You can message 87222. Right now, let's get the news headlines at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Yeah, pretty chocker at this end. Loads to get through. Welcome back to the home of common sense. We're talking universal credit has hit a record 8.3 million, 48% not required to even seek work. Now, what's behind that headline? Regardless of whether you sympathise and understand that there is a collective malaise, illness, whatever you want to call it, in the nation, even if that is the case, even if you are sympathetic and understanding and believe those figures word for word, where does a nation go with that? And by the way, it's going to get worse as we move through the years. Why are people not looking for work? Is it just down to disability or is something else going on? Also this afternoon, Justice Minister David Lammy has admitted that at least 3 prisoners are still on the run after 91 were released since April. This is a mess. Shadow Justice Minister Robert Jenrick has accused him of endangering the public, dubbing them Lammy's lags, great phrase, and slams the blunders after a sex offender was mistakenly freed just days after Lammy boasted, "We have the strongest checks ever." They need to do a register like at school, weren't they, on C-Wing? Maybe that's the only way around it. And a militant Christian nationalist wave seems to be rising in the UK, with one bishop called Kieran Dewar holding mass baptisms and also holding a Unite the Kingdom sermon, blending evangelism with forthright views on immigration and Islam. He'll be joining us later on the programme. Loads to get through on the show. 0344 499 1000. That is the number if you're messaging 87222. By the way, you can leave us a voice note on the first number, 0344 499 1000. Roy in Birmingham says the best way to start the reset of our benefit system could be to advise everyone that all new child-related benefits will stop in 9 months' time for obvious reasons. There is that. But simultaneously, we also have a reproduction problem, don't we? What is that the correct phrase? Well, certainly we're not having enough children in this country to sustain our workforce, years down the line. So the experts tell us. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news coming at you this afternoon here on Talk, in particular that focus on why people are not working. 1 million more people than this time last year are not working and have no requirement to look for work. And that, I think, is the big headline, isn't it? It's the idea you have no requirement. And I said it right at the beginning of the programme, there's one of two things going on. So either we have 1 million, I think it's 1.1 million, more people who are ill, physical, mental, whatever the illness is, or we have some people playing the system, and that might be the case. But whichever way it is, that is not a sustainable situation. I think we can all agree on that. Let's speak to somebody who knows this area well, Dr. Philip Lee, former MP and Justice Minister. Oh, in fact, we'll talk to Philip in just a second on the other story. I do apologise, my screen hasn't updated here. In fact, Philip's with us now. Philip, how are you doing?
I'm all right.
Listen, you can talk about benefits if you like. I know you can talk about anything. I know we've spoken before. But I do want to talk about David Lammy, actually, of course, because that's the crucial point. We're going to have a listen to a little clip here before we go any further. We know that Robert Jenrick came out fighting against Lammy. But let's have a listen to what the Justice Secretary said in the Commons just yesterday.
We understand that there are 3 mistakenly released prisoners currently lawfully at large. Their prison records show none of these are convicted sex offenders. I have been informed, Mr. Speaker, this afternoon that HMPPS are investigating a further case of a potential release in error on the 3rd of November who may still be at large.
Well, we can tie in the two stories, because at this rate, Philip, it's possible that David Lammy will be one of those on some sort of benefit because he might not have a job.
Yeah, afternoon, Ian. Last time you had me on, I said that being a Justice Minister was not a walk in the park, and I should imagine that David Lammy's missing the Foreign Office quite badly at the moment. It's very, very difficult. The system, the criminal justice system, from start to finish, from the police, which is actually the Home Office, through the courts, which is the Justice Department, and into prison, and indeed beyond that into probation. The whole system is stressed for a variety of different reasons, and the solutions are not overnight. And whilst you're trying to get to grips with it, there's always a bad story. I mean, it's a really difficult department to be if you're a politician, irrespective of your political sort of allegiance.
Indeed. And, I do understand, of course, that over various governments over the years, these errors do happen. But, of course, when you are in the job, regardless of whether they might predate you, let's be fair, Mr. Lammy's only been there half an hour, pretty much, in the Justice Department. But nonetheless, his name is on the tin. It becomes his responsibility. That's rightly or wrongly how it works.
Yeah, I remember when David Gauke, I had 3, and this is quite instructive, I had 3 Secretaries of State when I was a Minister of the Justice Department in my 2-year tenure. First one was Liz Truss, the second one was David Lidington, and the third one was David Gauke. And I remember David came in, as I recall, around about sort of December sort of time, 2017. And suddenly, on his lap, he's got the whole War Boys case. If you recall, the taxi driver whose probation was up, and he'd been recommended to be released at the time. And poor David sort of walked into this, and it was extremely difficult for him because he hadn't been in the department before. And yet, that's the nature of this sort of area of government policy and service. There's always another difficult case coming along.
Yeah, and I get it. You know, David Lammy didn't open the prison gates and say, all right, Barry, off you go now, your time's done, and then, oh my goodness, I've accidentally released it. Of course, there's a whole system in place that does that. Nonetheless, I mean, the errors still happen. Is it a resigning? I mean, you've just explained brilliantly, you know, what happened with David Gauke, and you know, suddenly you get the job, and there is. I seem to remember. I think it was Jackie Smith, wasn't it? There was a terror attack sort of a day after she became Home Secretary. Sort of similar territory. You sort of have to take it, and that's part of the job. But does it mean, therefore, that you should resign when these stories keep happening? Because, you know, we did talk about 91 people wrongly released, and that is under under Labour's watch, even if it's not under specifically Mr. Lammy's.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what the numbers were under the previous government's watch as well, because I wouldn't think that this was somehow a systemic problem that's just occurred in the last 18 months. I mean, the difficulty often in the criminal justice system that I observed is that there's a series of different agencies interacting with each other at critical junctures. So someone being released, you know, you've got the probation service, which is private. Okay, you've got local government, you've got the health service, particularly, and this is quite common where there's mental illness involved with regards to the person being released. The list goes on. The prison, the staff. Is there a staffing issue in the prison? Are they understaffed because of sickness? Because it's stressful being a prison officer, and trust me, there is an issue there as well. And so I suspect that there isn't one reason for this. And I suspect that it's quite systemic, which is probably now causing sleepless nights in the department because they're thinking, oh my God, when's the next one going to happen? Yeah. And so to unpick all of this and then actually to change it takes time. And the problem is at the moment, as you're seeing in politics at the moment, time is not you don't often have time to do anything. I mean, the poor Prime Minister is now being, there's about to be a leadership election. The whole thing is, it's like this. It's almost like it's all accelerated since we had this 24-hour news media, social media. Everything gets accelerated. And the reality is that most complex problems in government, systemic ones in particular, take time to assess, time to come up with a solution, and then time to implement a solution. Yeah.
And those days are gone. You remember back in the day when you could wake up in the morning and read a newspaper, and that was the first time you saw any news of any kind. Now, of course, you're bombarded before you go to bed. You can look at social media, you can turn on the TV, watch media news on loop.
I know this is slightly different, but I remember a staff member I once had who'd been in a previous, so she was slightly older, so she'd been in a previous generation of politicians before email. And the average MP was like getting a few letters a week. Yeah. Okay, and now it's hundreds a day. The same, if you're going to sort of translate it into ministerial office, the same problem occurs is because they're just getting bombarded. Now, they actually, as a minister, they actually have the private offices. They've got a bit of bandwidth to support all of this. However, it is rather daunting when you're sort of sitting there and you're just trying to sort of do the best you can, and then in addition to that, you're in a department like Justice, which has got systemic problems which predate, I would say this goes back decades, and it's in politics, the phrase polishing a turd is often used internally. Yes. And there's a real sense of that with certain government departments, that there have been systemic problems for some time, and you just end up being the next person who's got to do some polishing.
Yeah, and I wonder on a wider point here, Philip, and we sort of did touch on this a bit last time we spoke, is the brutal reality. Because like anything with government, it's all very well notionally having, you might have a fabulous idea and a great suggestion for the suggestion box, but of course if it clashes with the politics of the thing, then there becomes a problem. And so in the way that Labour tried to, in a very minimalist way, tried to look at the welfare budget, and the minute they did, all hell broke loose. People discombobulated on the Labour Labour benches, and they had to kind of scrap it. And similarly with prisons, I mean, we can all agree, surely we just put too many people in prison that shouldn't be there, right?
Well, you say that, but I certainly got scars on my back when I tried to suggest that in the House of Commons once at the dispatch box. And that was from my own side. I think the difficulty is that where the tension does occur in government, basically we have very centralised power in Westminster. Most cabinet ministers don't, I suspect, have much control over anything. Okay, it is usually number 10 that they will have a policy, and from that will flow everything else. And indeed, the cabinet ministers just wheeled out just to present it.
Yeah,
I think this is something that has happened probably, I'm not sure, probably since Tony Blair and since that's how it's become. So there's this grid, this media grid that actually exists, gets rolled out, and you have to adhere to this. And these are the Prime Minister's priorities. No, you're not going to talk about putting boxing into prisons, or you're not going to. I mean, in my case, I remember I spent a long time working specifically in the women's justice area, and looked at it, gone through all the evidence, and it was pretty obvious to me that quite a lot of women are banged up in this country unnecessarily and indeed inappropriately. Okay? Inappropriate in that it was never going to improve their situation in order to try to turn around their reoffending behaviour. There was a disproportionate amount of physical, emotional and or sexual abuse as a child and indeed as an adult in the backgrounds of too many women in prison. So therefore, what you had to try to do is change I never met a woman. I visited every women's prison in the country, and I used to meet a sort of selection of prisoners every time I went to them. I never met one who didn't think that they'd done something wrong. Okay, there was never a prisoner saying, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't be here because I didn't do it." Never happened to me. What I did notice, though, there were lots of women who were in this environment, and you could tell it was never going to be helpful.
Yeah.
So I tried to come forward with a strategy, and I was harnessing philanthropic support, some taxpayer-funded sort of matching that money in order to try to create residential women's centres, particularly for women with children, with families, because their children are also more likely to be offenders. So there's this constant vicious circle. And I was almost there. It was only 30 million quid. Okay, 30 million quid, which is an accounting error. It's 8 billion expenditure in the Justice Department, so 30 million is not a lot of money. And it got pulled to fix some toilets in the men's system.
Wow.
And at the time...
I can only imagine the language that came out of your office that day.
Well, the decision actually contributed towards me going, do you know what, this Brexit thing, I've got to do my thing because I think this is all a bit of a disaster and it's all going to become a political mess, which it subsequently did. And actually that decision made me think, I'm not sticking around anymore because I've done all of this work, I've got all of this evidence, and they're fixing the bloody toilets in the men's prison system instead of actually giving me just 30 million quid. And I had a target to halve the population. Going to your point about the numbers of people locked up, I had a target privately, because they wouldn't let me say it publicly, that I thought we could halve over a 10-year period the number of women in prisons. And it got scrapped because we needed to fix some loos.
Wow.
And I tell you that story because that is it. And I'm sure this has happened in different ways to different ministers in different departments.
Yeah. I'm absolutely sure. On that profound lavatorial moment, Philip, thank you again for being with us. We will speak once more, I'm sure, more than that in the future. Dr. Philip Lee, former MP, former Justice Minister. And I think what he said there is probably exposes, as he was alluding to at the end, loads of areas of government where you haven't got time for kind of like, let's try this idea or that idea, this is what we're going to do, this is how it's going, and you'll run with it and you'll be the minister that has to then go out, even if you don't believe it, on all the TV and radio channels and sell the policy from the rooftops. We're going to talk to Lenny and others in a couple of moments' time. 0344 499 1000. That's where you'll find us. Lines are open on all of this. This is Talk.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk 0344 499 1000. This one in from Matt. Just like to say I've never heard someone talk so much sense about unemployment. Thank you, Tina, who was our guest from the Federation of Small Business a little earlier. One from Polly, I think we have... no, that's Polly the Waspy. Thank you. I did read that a little earlier. Gary says the reason that so many more people are now claiming benefits without even being required to look for work is because they can. Let's face it, we have a benefit system that is so sloppily run that a gang of 5 Bulgarian crooks managed to create around 6,000 false identities and steal over 50 million quid from it without anyone involved in the administration of the system even noticing. The truth is that no incentive for the people assessing benefit claims to challenge them. In fact, it's the opposite, because if you are a civil servant, you just want an easy life and no grief in the job, and then handling out money every time somebody applies for some is the path of least resistance. That is bang on. That is exactly the problem with the entire system, the path of least resistance. We just spoke to a former Justice Minister. Everything he just said was that as well. Even if you're a minister, you're trying to get something done, and everyone around you go, nah, it's too, a lot of hassle, that, isn't it? Let's just retain the status quo. That's the best way to do business round here. A little bit of breaking news on Trump and Epstein. Apparently Jeffrey Epstein mentioned Trump in private emails several times. Democrats say the US House Democrats have released a new Epstein email that references President Donald Trump. One email is between a convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein, and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Trump has strongly denied knowing about Epstein's illegal activities. The two knew each other in the 1990s. And I'm not even sure why that's news. Isn't that just saying Jeffrey Epstein knew Ghislaine Maxwell? But Trump is mentioned. There is that. Well, it could give you more on that if that develops. Lenny is in Ashford. Lenny, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian, mate.
Nice to have you with us. What are you thinking?
Well, the consequences of all this unemployment is frightening.
Yeah.
And what it is, and I think the government have got to do something positive. They can't just go along like they are doing now, because the mathematics, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it genuinely, by any measure, it's not going to work. It cannot work, right?
That is it. It's what you're totally correct, Ian. And what it is, because what's all that's going to happen, the next generation, well, I could a little story. It goes back a lot of years. A friend of mine was a school teacher, and she asked all the children in the class what their parents did for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And one boy said, "My dad works at the post office." And she said, "Oh, what does he do at the post office?" "Oh," she said, "he only goes there one day a week to get his money." Now, the boy thought that was his job.
He thought it was his dad's job that he worked at the post office.
Yeah, he said that's where he goes to get his money.
Yeah.
And she said, I couldn't believe it. Well, that is the generation that's growing up behind the ones that are unemployed now.
And there's no doubt about it. People talk about there being, theft in the system, but what actually there is it's not quite the same thing. There's a dependency culture. I think that's the phrase I'm looking for, Lenny, a dependency culture. I've seen it happen up close and personal, that it takes 5 minutes for a human being to become dependent on something if it's offered. It doesn't mean that they are overtly think they're swindling the system. It doesn't mean they're horrible people. But dependency culture is different from, if you like, a criminal culture, which can also exist in the system.
Yeah, well, if everyone's doing the same, there's so many people doing the same, it just becomes the norm.
Yeah.
So what they've got to do, I mean, I know some countries that I've visited, you cannot draw any benefits at all until until you've actually worked and paid into the system.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, if you've only worked for argument's sake 6 months, then you can only claim 6 months benefits. So you can have benefits until what they're due.
Yeah.
But when they come to an end, you've got to sort it out yourself.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the dependency thing, the self-sufficient, self-responsibility thing has just completely gone out the window in recent years. And thank you, Lenny, for that. And I think partly COVID is to blame when the government decided to pay, half the country's wages for God knows how long. Was it 80% of your wages to do? I mean, really, 80% of your wages to do nothing, and you wonder why the system's broken. I'll give you an example of the system being broken. I found myself last night, I don't know how this happened, watching that ambulance programme. When they follow the ambulance crews and then they kind of give a little bit of the sort of personal stories of the staff. It's filmed, I can't remember which part of Yorkshire it's filmed in. But one of the a little stat jumped out at me on this. They talked about how one of the busiest days for GPs' surgeries is the Tuesday after Easter, because they've been closed for 4 days at that point. So Good Friday, Saturday, Easter Sunday, and the bank holiday Monday. So 4 days, and I'm thinking, how we live in the 21st century? They close GP surgeries for 4 days, more than half a week, for 60% of a week. How is that even possible? I mean, these things should be open at the weekend. They're scratching their head, going, we don't know how to solve the waiting. Open the flipping surgeries. They should be open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. That's the first thing. I know there's a staffing thing and doctors' availability and how many we've got and haven't got. I get it. However, this is what we've developed over the years. We have developed a system where doctors' surgeries are open less than they used to be. And that cannot be right. And yet, at the same time, we're talking about record amounts of people who apparently have got ill health. So they're having to donk on once a fortnight to get benefits because they can't work due to illness. And yet we close the doctor's surgery at the week. Why are they closed at the weekend, for God's sake? Let's go to Paul in Newport on the issue of benefits. Paul, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Afternoon to Ian. Ian, I've been on here a couple of times, and I'm normally an upbeat sort of bloke. But with benefit, if I hear another person going, oh no, I couldn't do nothing. No, I got up and what used to take me half an hour to do the house, it now takes me an hour. Right. Anyone who stands and says to me, I'm on benefits because there's nothing, absolutely nothing, not a job in the whole of the UK I can't do, I'll swing for you.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind, okay, you could be sweeping up the hair in the barber shop. Minimum rate, £25,000 a year. You could be a litter picker. £25,000 a year. Anyone who says, oh no, there's literally nothing I can do. There's nothing I can do. I'll swing for the buggers. There's always something someone can do. They just don't apply themselves. And you were saying about this dependency thing.
Yeah.
A few months ago, I'd have agreed with you. But because guys like you're doing a pucker job of saying to the UK specifically, right, we've had enough. So I honestly believe most people on benefits are getting the message that the rest of us are cheesed off about it. Yeah. Don't you go telling me that I'm going to work and putting in 60 hours a week, okay, so you can sit there and say, but I can't do that.
But you don't believe this million people that have been added to this particular pot over the last... You don't believe that million people are all ill?
No. I'll tell you why, okay? Do you remember when there was the government did the business... They gave like a load of money to businesses, didn't they, for free? The business protection scheme or something. I run a business. I took nothing. I took absolutely nothing. But anyway, the government's own figures were that the British people mugged the British taxpayer for 10 billion quid.
Yeah.
Right? 10 billion quid. If governments, and I'm sure most of us do, certainly most of us who listen to talk, if they don't start to understand that there are British people and people within the British Isles that will happily take whatever's going for free, even if they have to blag it, well, I'll have some of what you're sniffing then.
Yeah. I hear you. Paul, I've got to stop there just for time, but thank you. Great, powerful call from Paul in Newport. And just, by the way, to compound that, or to add to that breaking news, on newly released emails about Jeffrey Epstein, claiming that Donald Trump allegedly spent hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim of the late paedophile. The email was published by a congressional committee investigating the Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. In correspondence with his former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, the late financier said, "I want you to realise the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. A victim spent hours at my house with him. He's never once been mentioned." Interesting. Make of that what you will. Of course, if you were a die-hard Trump fan, or die-hard anyone fan, that's the way the world of confirmation bias works. You're not bothered about such detail. You'll just say that it's a stitch-up. You'll say that it's an injustice. You'll say that this happened because there are enemies within or whatever, while all the time ignoring the detail. Now, of course, in a case as convoluted as this, it's quite possible that the former president, who's known Jeffrey Epstein for decades before all of this came out, was not at his house with a victim of the late paedophile. That is, of course, possible, but I'm just bringing you the newly released emails that have claimed that Mr. Trump was there on at least that one occasion. Make of it whatever you will. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Doug says, let's not forget the attacks on Trump by Starmer, Lammy, Davis, Rayner, Khan and the Labour activists that went to the USA to help the Democrats. They have abused the special relationship and have never apologised. Yeah, that was when they were in opposition, of course, wasn't it? They said all sorts of things. I mean, Labour going to help the Democrats, or some Labour activists, Conservative activists go and help the Republicans. I haven't got a problem with that bit. But what is interesting is that so many senior figures, as Doug rightly points out, were very, very vocal, and they didn't just talk about, I don't like this guy, I don't think he's very good. They called him a Nazi and God knows what else. Horrendous stuff. Now, what is being called a new militant Christian nationalism, a wave, seems to be rising in the UK, with one bishop, Kieran Dewar's mass baptisms and a fiery Unite the Kingdom sermon. The American right-wing political activist who was murdered at an event a few months ago, Charlie Kirk, of course, was a devoted Christian himself. He sort of seemed to mix right-wing, what you'd call right-wing politics, with his own theological beliefs. Let's have a listen to Charlie speaking at one of his events.
I believe Christian charities and churches should step up and feed and to clothe and to be a helping hand, not government. In fact, we used to be a country that we had a lot more private charities going and helping people in need. In fact, I would make a contention, if the government cut all of its social welfare, every church would step up to make sure that no kid went hungry in this country and that no kid would die of starvation.
I would love if my tax dollars went to helping people who needed food. That's my argument here.
Well,
I think
it does. Over $1 trillion a year goes to food stamps and SNAP and Medicaid.
Perfect,
So,
and I'm glad with
no,
that.
But actually, it doesn't help them nearly as much as you think. Let me tell you why. Because then we subsidize bad eating habits of the poor, so that the working poor is very obese, so they go buy Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Frito-Lays, and the church is not involved, where the church would then say, hey, instead of going to the local grocery store with a bunch of food stamps and SNAP benefits, why don't you come by our church and we'll feed all of you and a much more healthy meal made by our own members, and then you can hear the gospel afterwards. That's the church in practice.
If Jesus fed people for free, taught people for free, and healed people for free, why don't we do the same?
Churches should.
There it is. Churches should. That is Charlie. I find it hard to disagree with what he said there. Let's speak with Bishop Kieran Dewar on this very story. Kai, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I mean, just your reaction to what you just heard Charlie Kirk say there.
I completely agree. The church has and always should be God's welfare system for society. When you look at the Jewish community, they don't go to the state if somebody loses their job or can't afford food. They go to the synagogue, and this to me is where the church is failing in the United Kingdom. We don't deal with the people that the Bible tells us we need to deal with in the way in which we should be dealing with them. We send them to the state to be fed, to be clothed. That's just, in my opinion, completely unacceptable.
So we've kind of lost our sort of Christian heartbeat, as it were, in this nation. And I know a lot of your work, and some of it, some people call it controversial. I wouldn't, but some people say, well, hang on a second, here's a man of the cloth, monkeying around, Unite the Kingdom rallies, and, happy to share the voice of many of those in society that are sort of ostracised by the media sometimes I'm sure rightly so, sometimes a complete injustice, frankly. But either way, it's not an area you imagine a man of Christian faith would find himself. But you are you're in that narrative and you feel very strongly about it.
I do, and why wouldn't I be there? Jesus went to where the sinners were. He didn't hide in the synagogue and wait for people to come to him. And this is the ethos that the church in this United Kingdom has lost. We've stopped going to people. We, for too many decades now, the Church of England, Church of Wales, other churches, they open the doors and expect people to come to them. Why would I? My whole mission, I actually said this to my Archbishop last week when we were together in Birmingham, and he looked at me with a bit of startling disbelief at first, and then caught on to what I was saying, because I said to him, Your Grace, I'm sick of trying to get people to church. I am all about trying to get the church to people, and that means meeting them where they need to be met, not expecting them to come to a building. That is the very thing that Christ teaches us in the gospel, and we need to be doing far more of it.
But when you go to a Unite the Kingdom event, are you going there because you're going to meet sinners, or are you going there because you're going to meet people you actually agree with?
Both, in many respects. There's a lot of political beliefs there that I share. There's an awful lot I completely disagree with. My presence there, as I said to Sky News, doesn't endorse somebody else's politics. I'm not there for that. We look at September, I had the unique opportunity to stand in front of 150,000 people according to the mainstream news, and over 1 million people according to the event organizers, to proclaim the gospel, to pray and offer what I called a sermonette of hope and inspiration centered around the very ethos of the Christian message. And guess what? If Stand Up to Racism or Hope Not Hate or all the other lefty liberals sent me an invitation to speak at one of their events, guess where I'd be? Right there, speaking for them. Because it's not about the platform and it's not about the politics. It's all about the people.
I'd love to. If you do get invited to the Hope Not Hate Christmas Bash, Kai, can I be your +1? Because I'd love
Most
to.
Certainly.
I'd love to see how that conversation would pan out. What I have noticed, though, since the horrendous killing of Charlie Kirk, there has been a kind of, it was phrased at the beginning as a sort of militant Christian nationalism. I have noticed some voices online. I know you can't always judge what the rest of the world thinks by things you read online, even if lots of people endorse it and retweet it and all the rest of it. But suddenly, out of nowhere almost, people who had fairly forthright, what you would call right-wing views, and some of them correct, some of them perhaps badly worded, to be generous, suddenly started invoking the kind of the God card almost. I saw somebody actually respond who I never for one second had them down as any kind of theological sort of character in any shape or form. When asked about something, he replied, "Only Jesus knows." And I thought, well, that's a fine thing to write, but I didn't believe this guy knew what he meant when he said it. It was almost as if, Charlie Kirk, he was a practicing Christian, and that wasn't an act. He genuinely was. Are there a lot of Charlie Kirk wannabes out there now?
I think potentially there are. I am the judge of no man's soul, so I couldn't understand what drives them. The scripture says that man looks at the outward man, God examines the motives of our heart, and that is, as rightly said, only Jesus knows in that respect. I also think that brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk has spurred the church militant, as we have been known for 2 millennia, it's not a new thing, into life. When you look at the scriptures, and you look at the Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, Saint Stephen, the one who we celebrate on Boxing Day, is martyred for his faith, for speaking truth to power. And suddenly that spurs the church into life. And when you look through history, every time there has been a significant martyrdom or significant persecution of the church, it has spurred the church into life. And that's exactly what we're seeing now, between what's taking place with things like the Unite the Kingdom rally, the persecution, particularly with what I find to be thoroughly unjust and unconstitutional laws concerning the Christian faith being enacted in the United Kingdom, and then couple that with that horrendous assassination. The church has and is continuing to suffer persecution. And as much as a socialist government would like to see the church disappear and go away, we have survived persecution for 2 millennia, and we are on the move again. And when they label us as Christian nationalists, this is a nation, the United Kingdom, whose very ethos is founded on Christian principles, who has a church established under law. Our sovereign is the supreme governor of the Church of England. If that is not a Christian nation, rather than this moniker that they give of Christian nationalism, I'm not quite sure what other proof you need. Our whole way of life, our culture, is built on biblical principles. Our legal system, political system, founded around Christian truths and Christian principles. We are a Christian nation, intrinsically linked to the principles of Scripture. And until such a time as that ever changes, we always will be a Christian nation.
And that is fair. Are you compromised, though, at times? When you see, for example, I don't know, there might be an almighty protest against a hotel that is housing asylum seekers, for example, and these are people who would be proud Brits and family values, not right-wing nut jobs or anything like that, just people who are concerned. This is our postcode. Suddenly 300 blokes have just turned up in a hotel, got no idea who the heck they are, where they come from, what their backstory is, even if they're not intent on any sort of criminality. We just don't know. So you've got concern from people in the community, but then you've got what we are told 300, vulnerable, stateless, homeless, mostly young men. Where, as a Christian, does that compromise you at all in terms of where your kind of spiritual instinct goes? Does it go with the people that rode across the channel, or does it go with the concerned neighbours?
So I have a heart for both people, and within the context of my faith, I am to care for both people. However, I think one of the things that has truly been lost amidst the whole immigration debate, which is more than just people coming across the channel. We have tens of thousands of people that enter through legal means and then never leave once their visas expire. That's just as much a concern.
Yeah.
The Church of England at the moment has taken the point of, well, we've got to welcome all the strangers and the foreigners. That's absolute claptrap, because the Scripture is very clear on what we have. We have just as much a duty to good governance as we do to caring for strangers and orphans and the widows. And the Church must never be in a position where we advocate the needs of other people, foreigners, invaders, for want of a better term, in certain cases, than we do in taking care of our own. This country has massive problems with child poverty. We have ridiculous numbers, more than ever, of people living below the poverty line. Homelessness is a massive issue. Families struggling to get on the property market, struggling to pay for groceries, struggling to pay for their utilities. And the state, in my opinion, is putting far more focus on caring for people entering the UK illegally than it is addressing these things. So the Church would teach you, and the Scripture shows us, we have a responsibility to the nation itself, to our ethnos, our people, first and foremost. And then where it is feasible and practical, we should be in a position to help those that are in need of our help.
And would that is there sort of biblical backing, for want of a phrase, for that position?
It's right through the Scripture, and it's what we see taught throughout the entire of the New Testament. When people actually bother to pick up their Bible and look, it is right there. That we cannot put the needs of other people coming here to the United Kingdom, from a church social teaching standpoint, above the needs of our own people who are struggling and are being subjugated to continued struggle by successive governments that refuse to acknowledge the needs of our own citizens and put the needs of other people coming here, whether legally or illegally, above those of people, our own citizenry, that are in desperate need. That is a complete antithesis to what the Scripture tells us. And when I see churches like the Church of England talking about, well, we just need to welcome everybody. No, we don't. That is not what the Bible teaches us.
Well, on that very point, the new Archbishop of Canterbury, this has only just dropped, this news, in about the last 40 minutes or so, Dame Sarah Mullally has suggested that people, well, she backs the idea of baptising asylum seekers. This, of course, comes on the back of the context of that. There was a discussion, I think, on these fake baptisms that were taking place where people were saying, yeah, I'm a Christian and look, I've been baptised and here's the evidence of it, and so I can stay here because I can't go back to Iran because they'll hang me by the watsits if I do, so I'll have to, become a Christian. But she has said that she backs the idea of baptising asylum seekers. I mean, that seems an interesting position from the most senior member of the Church of England.
Well, I would simply go, what a surprise. Once again, the woke Church of England making measures and taking things. We have no proof of who some of these immigrants are, where they're coming from, what they believe. And we must never lose sight of the fact that under the Eastern religion, there is a principle called taqiyya, where we would lie to do whatever we need until such a time, and that's perfectly acceptable within Islam. Conversion to Christ is not simply about baptism. It is about a genuine change of life and lifestyle. It is about submission to the teachings of Scripture and following in the paths. The Apostle Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. I will baptize anybody that makes a genuine profession of faith. But that profession is not just words, their lifestyle reflects it. So we've already had one scandal with the Church of England baptising asylum seekers. Clearly the new Archbishop of Canterbury elect is intent on causing another one.
And just a final point, at the Unite the Kingdom rally just over a month ago or so, one speaker, I think it was Ben, got the audience to chant Keir Starmer is a, and I think, well, I'll use the word anchor for the sake of broadcast, and the crowd joined in with it. Would Jesus back that?
Well, Ben isn't a Christian, for a start. Secondly, the crowd were already chanting it throughout the day before Ben got up, and I know Ben Habib personally. Would Jesus back it? No, I don't think he would, but at the same token, I understand the crowd that were there, the majority of them, are exceptionally frustrated and in absolute disbelief at the way our Prime Minister is running this country. And I understand that there is that sentiment amongst an awful lot of people. I personally don't feel like that. I just think that Keir Starmer is out of his depth as Prime Minister and is clearly pushing a socialist agenda that is the antithesis to our society and our way of life.
Yeah.
So I don't share those sentiments. But I, having been a public speaker for over 30 years, I understand what it's like to get caught up in the emotion of a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people standing in front of you. So for that, I don't judge anybody.
Yeah, some said it was offensive to, well, anchors, but that's another story. Listen, Kai, great to have you on with us. It's lovely to speak, and let's speak again. Bishop Kieran Dewar, what an interesting man, and what a fascinating, very open position on religion in the context of the current woes of this country. Love your response to that. 0344 499 1000.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk 0344 499 1000. Let's go to your calls. Grace is down in London. On that issue of Christian nationalism, Grace, you're a practising Christian yourself. What did you make of what you just heard the bishop say?
Well, I'm afraid I think Christian nationalism itself is an oxymoron.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus says that you cannot serve two masters, and I don't think that you can be a nationalist and a Christian, frankly, but that's my personal opinion.
Okay. So does that advocate a world without borders, then, to take it to its natural conclusion?
No, not saying that at all, no. I just think that there's a real danger within each of us to really want to worship and idolise something, and if we end up really, even if we don't realise it, idolising national identity, then that means we're not putting Jesus first, which is what we should be doing as Christians. I mean, I should say to begin with, I think actually a lot of people in this country, as much as the guest said this is a Christian country, and it's more a Christian country than it is a Muslim country or a Buddhist country, actually most people in this country don't really give Jesus any thought, and a lot of people, maybe understandably, presume it's all just mythical nonsense. And I kind of felt a little bit like that until I read quite a lot about the history of the accounts of Jesus' resurrection, and prior to that I'd seen reasoning relating to science to conclude that there must be a designer. So I would just urge anyone who hasn't to look at apologetics, which is the rational reasoning for concluding Christianity to actually be true. It's not just about wanting to have a set of beliefs or following a tradition. But I am concerned seeing quite a number of people seeming to think that Christianity is kind of like, it's part of our heritage and it's about opposing these other people who are bad, and that's not what Jesus called us to. Jesus was living in a time where his people were under the occupation of the Romans, but he didn't go around opposing the terrible tyrannical Romans who had a weird religion and who were violent. He was focused on telling people to turn to him. And we each have the choice about whether or not we want to repent and follow Jesus. And if we do, that's what Christianity is really about. It's not about politics. It's not about national identity. I mean, it comes from the Middle East. It was in Africa before it was here. And it feels like people are taking it on as a part of their identity politics and a part of what they feel is part of their heritage, rather than because of Jesus. And
it does for some people. There are lazy worshippers as well, people who will latch on to something if they think it authenticates something they believe, whether it's left-wing, right-wing, whatever. I get that. Listen, Grace, I've got to stop there just for time, but thank you for that. Very quickly, we can bring you the voice of doom. Day 3, nobody has got it so far. It's the mystery voice. It's a politician, dead or alive, young or old. Who is this?
Rightly and properly.
Can we hear that again?
Rightly and properly.
If you think you know, 87222. It's a bit of a stinker, this one. Can't tell you which party or what era, but have a crack at it. Here it is again.
Rightly and properly.
If we get a correct answer, of course, we will tell you right after the headlines at 3 o'clock. 87222 if you want to give it a go. If you think you know who this is.
Rightly and properly.
Find out in a few moments' time if we get a winner. Right now, headlines at 3.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Home of Common Sense. What are we talking? We've got loads to talk about. In fact, the big headline today about the amount of people now out of work and not required to look for work has increased by 1 million in a year. So you haven't got a job, but you're not forced to get a job. It means one of two things. There are some people messing with the system and claiming what they shouldn't have, or collectively, all those people got ill. So ill, you're not even required to look for a job. So which one is it? And by the way, whichever one you pick doesn't change the reality of the unsustainable nature of our welfare system, which is growing by the hour. We'll have more on that and more comment from you as well. Also this afternoon, Justice Minister David Lammy has admitted that at least 3 prisoners are still on the run. This is after 91 were wrongly released since April. Shadow Justice Minister Robert Jenrick has accused him of endangering the public, dubbing them Lammy's lags, and slams the blunders after a sex offender was mistakenly freed just days after Mr Lammy boasted of the strongest checks ever. How did that work out, David? More on that as well. And there's an interesting one. At least 549 trans patients were recorded as female despite going for male-only conditions. This included 313 prostate cases. Clinicians warn misclassification skews data and urged recording biological sex in order to protect accuracy and care. Yes, you would have thought that would be fairly obvious, but don't let that stand in the way of the gender evangelists, and they are out there, believe me. 0344 499 1000. This came in from Sean, who says, the point I'd like to make regarding high unemployment is that I understand you've covered this before, but I must say again that young people, generally their late teens, are finding it very difficult to find work for themselves. We spend a lot of time messaging employers and receive no replies at all. We had this with our first son and are now going through it again with our youngest. Experience seems to be the issue when we do get a response, so how are they supposed to get started in life? For myself, I started on the YTS scheme automatically from school. I remember that. There needs to be another way for young people to get into work. Thank you, Sean, for that. And we constantly hear this. The amount of the amount of people that get if they do get a response at all, often, in fact, proportionately don't get any response, but if they do, the argument is we're looking for people with experience. Now, obviously, if you're applying to be a brain surgeon and you're only 19, you know, it's not unreasonable to ask for a bit of experience. But it does seem to be a little bit of a cul-de-sac that young people are bumping into. And it is worth saying that nobody should be suggesting all young people are lazy old sons of guns, because that also isn't the case. Many want to work, but what is out there is perhaps dissipating as well as the demands from employers looking for experience. 0344 499 1000. So let's move then to this story. This is Tim Davie back in the news, of course. He's blaming enemies of the BBC for stoking the bias scandal. Is that real? Is that fair? This comes at the same time that Donald Trump has spoken to Fox News last night about the ongoing story regarding him suing the corporation for $1 billion. Let's have a listen to what the US president had to say.
Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, why not? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it. And their top echelon,
Director General and the CEO,
this is within one of our great allies. You know, this is supposedly a great ally. BBC, the government has a chunk of that one, I guess. But that's a pretty sad event. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical. And they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people.
Well, was it a peaceful speech? It was certainly a radical speech. I don't dispute that. And, of course, he was impeached as a result of what happened on January the 6th. That didn't go anywhere. He then became president when it might have done. However, Can he sue the BBC? David Engel, the lawyer, is with us, head of reputation and information protection with Addleshaw Goddard, the law firm. Good afternoon to you, David. I mean, you know, this is sort of filed under headlines you never thought you'd be reading. The American president is suing the BBC for reputational damage. Firstly, good afternoon. Secondly, can he do it?
Afternoon, Ian, and thanks for having me on. Can he do it? Well, he's asking for three things. I mean, it's the 1 billion damages claim that's grabbing the headlines, but the other two things he's asking for is an apology and a retraction from the BBC. If that was as far as it went, putting to one side the 1 billion damages claim, then he has probably got a decent claim, and he has a claim he could bring here or he could bring in the US as he wishes. The 1 billion damages claim is a potential issue, I would guess.
So, yeah, I mean, it sounds to anyone that, I mean, this idea of, you know, and maybe it works differently in this international world we live in, David, but generally speaking, if you are talking about some kind of libelous issue or what a reputational issue, then I think I'm right in saying you sort of have to demonstrate in some way that, you know, you had clearly suffered a loss as a result of that. And I think, you know, considering he went on to win a landslide, it'd be hard to push that particular card.
That's kind of right. Actually, in defamation cases in England, and I think the position's the same in the US, obviously I should say I'm not US qualified, you don't actually have to demonstrate an actual loss. You just have to demonstrate that your reputation was harmed. And sometimes the court will be happy to accept that on the basis of what was said and how widely it was published and who would have seen it. But you're right, there's a huge issue here around jurisdiction, because the programme went out on air in the UK, obviously. President Trump's lawyer seems to have indicated that he's thinking about suing in Florida. I can see why you would say that on one level, but on the other hand, how many people in Florida watch Panorama? Yeah. So that might not be a big number.
Yeah, well, they go to bed about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, don't they? That's what happens in southern Florida. So there is. I don't know whether they did or not. It's interesting the way this has panned out. I mean, because the BBC, I'm sure their argument, I don't know, I haven't seen the entire episode. I think from what I can guess, or what I'm assuming, talking to colleagues in this world, is that producers, if you watch the entirety of it, would stand by it and say that it actually opens up the context a little more. I mean, journalistically, frankly, it is unforgivable how this little montage of his speech was put together. I don't know a journalist or an editor that would ever go there, but somebody clearly did. But in the wider, if you watch the whole programme, it's more, it explains itself a little more, and that perhaps would be their defence.
That would certainly be a defence, and the court would be quite sympathetic to that. I mean, for example, you can't sue on a headline in a newspaper if the rest of the article makes it clear that what the meaning of the whole article is. And in a way, this is similar, although, you know, I do think it's quite difficult for the BBC.
So, I mean, there are people who aren't necessarily fans of Trump who think the mere idea that he would sue for some kind of reputational damage is beyond satire.
Well, that is a live issue, because you can't get damages. You can't have your reputation harmed if you already have a bad reputation. But, you know, I imagine what his people would say is that for everyone who is not fond of President Trump, you know, there's another person or another two people who are very fond of him. So, you know, he can sue in defamation. What's more, he's already successfully sued 2 media organizations in the States in defamation. But, you know, there are a number of issues. I've alluded already to jurisdiction. Where do you sue? The most an English court, if he decided to sue in England, he'd be very lucky to get anything north of £200,000 or £300,000. So 1 billion would be absolutely outlandish from the perspective of an English court.
In the US, they have juries, or tend to have juries more often in defamation cases. They tend to award more damages, and you can perhaps see that a Florida jury sitting in on a case where they have their president, their local boy, in some senses, suing the media mouthpiece of their old colonial masters, as they might paint it. There might be some sympathy, but there are a lot of legal hurdles to get over. And guess what? At the end of the day, the BBC might actually run a defence of truth.
Well, indeed. Yeah, indeed. And David, finally, if you got the call from the White House saying, from Mr. Trump, David, I've got a case for it. It's a beautiful case. I'd like you to represent me. Would you go for it?
I've had a number of cases against the BBC. Subject to the agreement of my managing partner, I would be delighted to.
I will be there in the press gallery for every moment. David, thank you, sir, for that. That's David Engel, lawyer, head of reputation and information protection at Addleshaw Goddard Law Firm. Let's speak to the journalist Nicole Lampert on this very point. Nicole, I mean, what a mess this is. The idea that we're even talking about this, that we've got to this stage, it's crazy. As I said to David at the beginning, if somebody had kind of predicted this a few years ago, you think, well, that wouldn't happen. Certainly nobody would be messing around with edits on a panorama programme. That wouldn't happen either. All of this is stuff that once upon a time was sort of unimaginable.
It feels that way, but I guess also it's just worth remembering that it's not just about Trump, it's about so much more, and that's one of the big issues, that it's easy to concentrate on Trump and his big demands, and of course it is worth saying that the BBC has apologised to him. They haven't apologised to anybody else, but they have apologised to him. But the other issues that are going on that are part of the problem with the BBC are to do with its reporting on Gaza, for example, its reporting on gender, it having things like historians who aren't historians, telling stories that aren't quite true. So there's a whole big lot of issues, and in some ways, yes, the whole story with Trump, maybe that's unimaginable, but the other stuff, maybe it is imaginable, because it has been going on for more than a couple of years.
And I've been trying to work out, and I'm sure you too, Nicole, from a journalistic perspective, where does this now put the BBC? Because these are not, I keep hearing people say, well, if you look back, I don't know how long the BBC's been going, 5,000 years or something, but if you look back at all of it, then, you will find that, the amount of stories like this don't even register. There's so few of them. But I would kind of counter that, actually, and say that's not been the case of late. And in fact, a lot of what we've got, and nobody disputes the great work that Panorama has done in the past, and some great investigative stuff. They've exposed a lot of things. It's helped change laws and bring people to justice. I get all of that. I understand that. And they've done a great investigation on their news this week about people running vape shops and doing all sorts of nefarious things. When good, they can be very good. But there does seem to be a reasonable, objectively, I'm saying this, body of evidence to say that things haven't got better. They've kind of got worse. And it's sort of come to a bit of a head in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, the Prescott report, or the memo, came out as a result of, partly because they were looking at themselves after the Hugh Edwards scandal and various other scandals. There's been Strictly Come Dancing scandals. There's been, several others. So they had to look at themselves. And certainly for me, as a member of the Jewish community, one of the big issues occurred in 22 when some Jewish kids went to Oxford Circus. They were Orthodox Jewish kids. They went there for Hanukkah. They went and they were dancing with the Hanukkah candles in Oxford Circus, and they were attacked by some men. And that became a massive became a massive story, because there was video from the bus where these men were banging on the windows with their shoes and spitting at them, and it was covered by most publications just in a normal way. The BBC decided to say that the anti-Arab slurs had been heard in the bus, but no one else had heard them. They then changed it to an anti-Arab slur. But again, no one else really heard it. It was listened to, Ofcom reported against the BBC. The BBC wouldn't stand down. And I think one of the issues that we're seeing now is that the BBC, instead of looking at itself, is gone on the attack. It's attacking its enemies. And I listened to Tim Davies' speech yesterday to BBC staff, and he talked about people weaponising these attacks. And it seems to me that this isn't an organisation that's really listening to the criticism. There is some genuine criticism there that should be taken on board, particularly about BBC Arabic. And one of the things that I'm worried about is that the person that has now taken over from Deborah Turner as head of news was in charge of BBC Arabic, which had many issues.
Yeah, you might have thought that would have precluded somebody from even the interview process. Rightly or wrongly, but you might have thought that.
Yeah, yeah. He's her deputy. He's now the acting head of news. And apparently he also kind of poo-pooed the whole Trump thing. So you do have to question this judgment, his judgment, and the judgment of the people that have put him in charge of the news operation when all eyes are on it. And he's Jonathan Munro, he's named in the Prescott memo as someone that's not taking it on board, the criticisms. So are they really listening at all? So if they're not listening, then how can we expect them to change?
And I've been trying, I've worked at the BBC. I was not there for very long, but I did a bit there enough to, and have enough mates that, some lifers over there at the Beeb and others that have drifted in and out on a freelance basis as people do in this industry. But I do wonder, in the same way that people who want to become lawyers, human rights lawyers, they gravitate to that area, and it's fine, it's a democracy, because they have an inner feeling about something and injustice and all the rest of it. So they want to become lawyers in that field because it satisfies areas that they feel very strongly about. And I wonder whether we now have more people going into journalism for similar kind of reasons. And of course, going into journalism should be because you have an objective mind and a very open mind to issues, not because you are sort of single-minded on certain areas that you want to focus on. But it's in the absence of any other explanation as to why we're seeing so much of this. That's all I can think of. And going back to the bus story that which I remember well, and it was devastating to watch this unfold and to be reported as it was reported. But I can only imagine someone in the newsroom. They don't believe that their misplaced opinions in their world are not opinions, they're facts. So they don't believe they've done anything wrong, and that's the trouble. So when somebody says, I think we should go with that line and we'll talk about the anti-Arab slur from the person on the bus, even though there's literally no evidence of it, because in their mind they passionately believe that must have happened in order to facilitate this disquiet, this moment between two sets of people.
Yeah, I think that what we're definitely seeing in newsrooms and certainly at the BBC and in other places is kind of activists coming in, and that's maybe because of what's happening on our university campuses, where again we now have activists as lecturers, and certainly those of us who are Jewish are kind of like the high end of that, but we're seeing all the kind of neo-colonialist stuff, all of this kind of Britain, empire-hating stuff. So we're seeing a lot of them coming out of university kind of fired up with activism. And there's definitely, from people that I've spoken to at the BBC, and I have kind of looked into this quite deeply, and one of those things is definitely activist journalists, and the way that they kind of control, because there's a lot of them and they're very noisy. And I'm sure you were like me when I started in journalism. I was just do what I was told, really.
Yeah.
I was so happy to get my foot into the door that I would really do what I was told. And perhaps in some ways it's good that this generation of journalists, they're happier to speak up when they're unhappy about things. But perhaps it's gone too far where grown-ups are listening to, this is certainly what we saw in the report in terms of the LGBTQ plus stuff, that they were listening to a tiny cohort of activist journalists who basically meant that they weren't allowed to have any gender critical people on the TV and that kind of thing. And so there's definitely an element of that. And then certainly from what I've been told in terms of the anti-Israel stuff, which has also formed quite a large part of the report, is that it's for an audience that doesn't normally come to the BBC. And they know that they like this stuff. So it's an area. They're basically saying, right here, we'll give them this, and we'll give them another. Israel did something bad today, which is why there's so much on the BBC concentrating on the Israel-Gaza conflict, much more than Ukraine and Russia, which of course impacts us Brits much more in many ways.
Of course it does. Listen, very thorough stuff, Nicole. Great to have you on again. Thank you, Nicole Lampert, journalist, and very passionate about the disintegration of the state-funded broadcaster that is the BBC. Tim Davies fighting back against the BBC enemies. Your take on that? 0344 499 1000.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is talk. Just before we go any further, let's just do the voice. We've got some great calls coming up. Voice of Doom. This was the voice we played you before the news.
Rightly and properly.
Who's that? These are some of the guesses. Peter Cardwell. No. Winston Churchill. It is not. Morgan McSweeney. Definitely not. Colin Firth. Come on, you're japing away here now. It wasn't. David Mellor. Jeremy Thorpe. No, we didn't get an answer. It means it rolls over to tomorrow. Some sad news just breaking as well. Baroness Helen Newlove might not have been a name known to everybody, but she was the former Victims Commissioner of England and Wales, has passed away after a short illness. Now, of course, Helen, I didn't know Helen. I did meet her a couple of times, sat next to her at a function on one occasion as well. She came to prominence, really, after the murder of her husband, Gary, back in 2007. If you remember, he went outside to confront some kids who were vandalising her car, and he was, as a result, killed by this gang. It was a murder, all sorts of antisocial behaviour in that neck of the woods. And she took up this after he died. I think he died the next day after the attack. She took up the cause and eventually was so vocal about knife crime and street crime and antisocial behaviour that she got the role of Victims Commissioner and did it very, very well. But it's very sad to see that she had lost her battle of a short illness. I mean, she was only 63. So Baroness Newlove, the Victims Commissioner. She was named Interim Victim Commissioner for a one-year term. I think she did it and then stopped doing it and then went back to it, but sadly has passed away at the age of 63. Let's go to your calls. Anne is in Sussex. This is Back to the BBC. Anne, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call, Ian.
It's a pleasure.
What's been on my mind since long before the last election with what was going on in the media is over the years, I've been very privileged to know journalists and been spoken to and used by journalists who put items out who were really good journalists. Mm-hmm. And they really did look at, they're investigative, they look at what's going on. Lots of things wouldn't have happened in mid-Sussex without those good journalists. But I am worried that now, with so many universities have been offering these media studies course, and I'm sure not all of them have been that good. Yeah. And I remember, I won't say which university, when students didn't turn up, but they still seemed to pass, for all their systems. But they've got away with not being good, but maybe have been employed by the BBC and others. And of course, because you've got to employ people and tick the boxes, you've got the right gender, the right race, we don't always get the best people. And I think we're paying dearly for that. And I think that's why we're in the mess we're in.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Very well and eloquently put, Anne. Thank you very much indeed for that. Anne in Sussex. Let's go back to the benefits issue. Carl is in Loughton. Carl, what have you got for us? Hi.
I'm in Luton, not Loughton. But
you're in Luton. OK, that's all right. It's easy mistake. Easy mistake to make. Carl's in... Let's do it all again. This is Carl in Luton. Where else? What have you got for us, Carl? Afternoon.
Well, I understand that many people deserve benefit. One of my best friends is an army veteran. He's got a chronic heart condition. Mm-hmm. On average, diagnosis to death, 9 years. So he's on benefit. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But I see so many people. I go out on a Saturday night. I see so many people in the pub. Yep. Living the life of Riley. They're on benefits. They deliberately only work less than 16 hours a week, and they're getting disability benefit. So they're feeding from 3 troughs.
How are they not able to... I mean, somebody earlier on, Carl, said because of the way, a lot of the stuff is now, the assessments are done online, which is rubbish, frankly, because that opens itself up to all sorts of fraud, right?
Oh, the disability benefit is so corrupt. My friend's got a heart condition and cannot work. Yeah. He's been told by his doctor... I mean, he's been told off by his doctor because he tried to work. All right, so he thought, I'll try and get disability benefit because, he's a veteran. He's worked. He's done it. He's served his country. He's done his bit. So he applies for disability benefit. Yeah. Gets turned down. He appeals, gets turned down, and he's done that 3 times. And even his doctor says, I don't understand why you don't get disability benefit. Yeah. And he's spoken to his doctor, the disability people have never asked for his medical records.
I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, you know, so you've got to... And this does... I know these are anecdotal stories, but it does seem to be a bit of a pattern here. For people who genuinely have an issue seem to struggle more than those that perhaps don't.
Well, yes. I mean, I see people. I go out on a Saturday night. Yeah. I have a good time. I'm living my best life.
I'm glad to hear it, Carl. What else can you do in Loughton?
Yeah, well, exactly. I see people out on a Saturday night that I know are on benefit, and I know are getting disability benefit, and some of them are working little part-time jobs as well. So they're getting their benefit, they're getting a good whack of the disability benefit, and they're doing a part-time job, and they've got more spare money than I've got, and I've always worked.
Yeah. What do you do? That's all. You see, there is the real rub, isn't it? When you see people, I remember as a kid, Carl, you know, watching people go on holiday that no one worked in the house, and they'd have holidays to Spain, and you know, we'd never been further than Cleethorpes at that time. Goodness me, Carl, thank you very much indeed. I have to move for time, no other reason. 0344 499 1000. Lots to get through here. More to come from you as well. Right now it's 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk 25 to 4. Peter Cargwell's here at 4, of course. Before we get to Peter, lots to get through at this end, including this. Well, I was about to say sort of bamboozling story, the kind of story, again, in a long chain of stories that just a few years ago you could never have believed would even be in the headlines. You wouldn't believe or imagine we'd be talking about the increasing numbers of trans women who are being recorded as female on NHS records despite receiving treatment that are specifically for biologically male conditions. And that includes 313 admissions for prostate issues. The gland enlargement biology, of course, impossible for women to experience. Only men can. But when they did the data, they were put down as a woman, despite the fact they had a prostate and who knows what else they had down there as well, for that matter. Amy Gallagher joins us, ex-nurse at the Tavistock and commentator at the New Culture Forum. Good afternoon to you, Amy. And I guess, you know, we've spoken so many times on this sort of thing, it's not really that surprising anymore.
No, it's not surprising, although you would hope now with the Supreme Court ruling and all the gains we've had in pushing back against gender ideology that you would see this stuff slowing down. I mean, these statistics are from last year up until April of this year. So this is still going on, you know, and it is a little bit surprising. Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, I do think staff need to be more aware of the gains that have been made legally, because I think, you know, this idea of gender identity is still running rife in the NHS, and I think there needs to be training actually to say to staff, look, we've been pushing this thing for years, but actually it's against the law and it goes against biology, and there needs to be a total change of culture in the NHS, because otherwise it will still keep happening.
I mean, this was somebody legislated for this at some point, presumably. Somebody actually said, yes, we should record these patients as women, even though we are treating them for a prostate condition. I mean, it doesn't take... You don't have to have a clinical head to realise that there's potential real pitfalls and problems with this, not least in recording data.
Yeah, I've seen it happen in organisations. All it takes is for one kind of activist person in the staff group, or just a general sense of a culture that emerges where everybody's nervous to ask questions about trans or what this person's sex or gender is, and then everybody just kind of goes along with it. Like I used to do emergency admissions in A&E, and sometimes I'd just be given details like the patient's name, and I'd be told that they were non-binary, and I'd turn up and I'd say, look, this is all the information I've been given, and they say, well, is your patient male or female? And I say, well, I've just been told that they're non-binary and here's the name. And then it would turn out that the name that I'd been given was their new name to match their new identity. So I had totally wrong information about the patient, and it took time to work out who this patient was. And it delayed treatment. And another thing about this is that it just delays staff so much, because when you're working in the NHS, you have to deal with large amounts of information about a patient and kind of get to grips with it quite quickly. And if you read that they're trans, or that they have some kind of you're trying to work out, okay, they're trans, so what are they? Are they a male or female? Is this their new name? It's so hard, because what's on the system is different from what's on the notes, so you just don't know what you're doing.
I mean, even I would also blame the individuals themselves, the patients on this. If you turn up at A&E and there is a condition you have, and it's kind of relevant, in fact, even if it's not that, you know, clearly biologically it is a hospital, it is A&E, I think you have a duty as the person to say, okay, I identify as Gemma Smith, but I'm actually biologically a man, and you need to know that because I'm here in a medical setting for treatment. You know, surely, and the non-binary thing, which as we all know is not even a thing, just an idea of identity in some people's minds, that's even more mysterious, of course, because then you really are trying to play a game of working it all out.
Yeah, I agree. The onus should be on the patient to provide the accurate information. But of course, with gender dysphoria, a lot of these patients, if you know, they claim that it feels distressing to reveal their true sex or their true name or so on. Yeah. So it does then in that case, it is for the staff to be able to feel confident to ask questions. Yeah. You know, it's almost as though it's bigoted to say, sorry, what is your sex? Sorry, what is your actual name? Yeah. But you absolutely need this information, and it's very dangerous if you don't. We're going to get totally inaccurate information about the rates of certain illnesses in men and women and whether they're going up or down, because there may be an increase in men experiencing a certain illness, but if they're recorded as female, that's not going to show up. So it's just total misinformation across the board. And I mean, the absolute basis of medicine and healthcare is biology. Like every healthcare professional usually has to do a module in biology, and the idea that we've replaced that with gender identity, it just boggles the mind how the whole of the NHS could have allowed this to happen, and it needs to be undone now. Now that we've had the Supreme Court ruling, we need to go back.
Is there any intel on the medical street, as it were, in this case, Amy, to suggest that things are getting better and what they used to do or record is no longer happening, certainly at the same rate?
I don't know. I mean, I think that people who are kind of against, I guess, want to push back against transgender activism, women with gender critical views who believe that biology is real. I think those of us feel a bit more confident in pushing back. But I do think there is still this culture of not wanting to question somebody's trans identity. And as I say, I don't really see some of the more overt signs of it, like rainbow lanyards and pronouns at the end of emails. It feels like that's died down a little bit, but I still think there's really a real nervousness about asking these kind of very basic questions. And as I said, I think I think staff in the NHS need someone to come in and give them some kind of training and say, you are allowed to say this, and actually you should be asking these questions, and we need accurate information. And this whole gender thing, they can't do that, because they'd have to admit that what they were pushing for years was wrong, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this is about.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, a concession that the battle is lost, I guess. Amy, thank you for your time as ever. Amy Gallagher. Amy's an ex-nurse at the Tavistock controversial clinic for reasons I'm sure you're familiar with. Now a commentator at the New Culture Forum. 0344 499 1000. Some comments from you. Amanda says the BBC are blinded by their self-righteous arrogance. I'm afraid nothing will change. Bang on. That's exactly what's at stake here. If you put some of these cases to certain members of staff at the BBC, they would argue it all day long. As sure as night is day, they would argue it and say, no, there's nothing to see. There isn't a problem. There is a problem, because people have developed, you know that thing, your own truth. What's your truth? She just told her truth. Or he just gave, I mean, yeah, I get it. The truth isn't always everyone's idea of what is right and wrong. But man alive, that's what we're wrestling with here, kind of like messed up ideology, where you have almost activist journalists who won't say it out loud, but believe they are objective. It's a bit like when they had the climate debate. You remember the BBC ruled a few years ago, I think they unruled it, that you don't have other voices on in the climate debate. You don't bring in somebody with another view, because there is no other view. There isn't another view. These are facts. So we don't get somebody on when there is an obvious fact about the interest rate rising. They don't then interview, Bob from Arbroath, who says, I'm afraid it's not rising. You're mistaken to believe. They don't do that, because it would be stupid, because it's clearly true that the interest rate has risen. And similarly, they sort of applied that to the climate debate, even though there were so many, let's be generous, so many nuances to the debate and so many tentacles and variables to the debate, because it goes into such a large area. We're talking about, the potential extinction of planet Earth. I think there's going to be quite a lot of voices on that. I know you can't get them all on at once, but they sort of banned that and said, no, this is the view, and we're not going to be messing around with people with alternative views. And that's where some of the rot really set in. And I think that sort of same ideology got applied to things like gender, where they were absolutely settled on the fact that if a bloke calls himself a woman, he is a woman, or she is a woman, whatever way you want to look at it. And they were totally sold on that. No debate. No, that's not a debate. Anyone who debates that is a fascist. If you debate that, then you're a trans Nazi, or whatever these phrases that they throw, the TERFs and all that business. I mean, it was just such anti-intellectual hogwash. There's no school of learning on the planet that would take you in that direction. But that's where they went. And so they sort of settled on that. Similarly, Middle East, Israel, genocidal aggressors, Gaza, hapless victims. They divided it up and believed it. No nuance, no alternative view. If something's gone on, then it's more in all likelihood going to be Israel's fault. See October 7th for details and all the rest of it. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Kirsten down in London. Back on that issue of benefits, Kirsten, what have you got for us?
Hi. So we've talked before, and it's really difficult for me to understand why the government would give all these benefits to people who don't even need to prove that they're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
We pay 40% of our salaries, my husband and I, and a family member who shall remain anonymous, gets to go to holidays with the whole family for 2 to 3 times per year.
Wow.
When my husband and I can't do that because we, with the broader shoulders, as they love calling the people who
simply earn a living.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have to pay for childcare.
Mm-hmm.
We have to pay for someone else's childcare,
Sure.
isn't it? So it's I suffer from long COVID since the very beginning of the pandemic, and this year I finally got myself to ask for help, and they said that I actually don't need it.
Right.
Whereas there are people who get a car for problems with their intestines, isn't it? So I just don't get this system at all.
You do kind of wonder whether the system was designed so that no one person understands it, because it is so convoluted, and there are so many. And I know these are seen as sort of anecdotes, and therefore, you know, you don't make policy based on anecdotes. But when there's so many of them, and the numbers that we're looking at, the increasing number of people that are not just out of work, but have no requirement to look for work. I mean, the idea that we wouldn't, I mean, this should be front page news for the next week, frankly. 1 million people more, not just 1 million people, 1 million extra people, Kirsten, in the last year. I mean, this should be analysed within an inch of its life, this, right?
100%. I was telling my husband the other day the same thing with people kids who suffer all these mental issues. Back in the day, it used to be that he was just misbehaved. Now, children must have some sort of thing. So it can't be that 8 kids or 8 people out of 10 in Great Britain are suffering from conditions. I refuse to believe that it's possible.
I refuse to believe it too. Kirsten, thank you very much indeed. It does seem, I mean, the numbers are just sort of beyond extraordinary, aren't they? That you'd have to go, collectively, all those people have suddenly got ill, physically, mentally, whatever. And again, I'm just going to repeat what I said throughout the show. If that is the case, we still have a problem in terms of funding this, because this figure is going to get worse. How bad would it have to get? So based on these figures alone, if you fast forward 10 years, then you'd have, 10 million people or something who are in this position. 10 million people. That's like 1/7 of the population. And even more profound if you look at just the adult population. So we're heading towards a world where by 2050, where half the population can't work based on these stats. This comes from Stan the Man in Cheshire. Says, Ian, no wonder people on benefits don't want to work when we are keeping the illegal immigrants in the lap of luxury for free. Well, maybe there is some sort of a slight protest in all of this, where you kind of sense that, well, you know, frankly, why should I care? It's maybe sort of reduced our moral litmus test on what is acceptable. If you see £5-6 million a day being spent on people who are not legally even meant to be in the country, then you probably feel slightly more relaxed about taking the piddle out of the system. Amanda in London, the BBC are blinded by their self-righteous arrogance. I think I read that. Happy to read it again, though. Lots of comment coming in from you. We'll go back to your calls. More of that on the way. Peter Cardwell's here at 4 and we'll chat to him before the news. This is Talk.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. More comments coming in. This one from Martin in Bristol. Rather than $1 billion, this is the Trump BBC thing, maybe the mighty Donald would accept a place on next year's Strictly. It's worth a punt. I'm sure he's more of a Bake Off fan, but it's a different channel now. It's a very good point, actually. Can you imagine the box office numbers for that? Barry says, regarding the president, he may or may not sue, but the BBC is now between a rock and a hard place. Their journalists find that he refuses to talk to them. He could refuse entry permits for the World Cup on the grounds that it's a terrorist organisation, having supported Hamas. Very good point. I mean, who knows what the next World Cup, of course, is in America. And it's sad, really, because, by the way, your average BBC journalist, and I know so many of them, I couldn't even begin to list them, is certainly... They're not all mad left-wingers, that's absolutely for sure. One of my real mates was, a head honcho there, was probably more in Farage territory than anything else, but he was brilliantly objective when it came to who got booked for things and how TV formats were put in place. He was around during the whole Brexit thing. He was a big Brexiteer, but knew, when he was putting together those big Brexit debates, had to do so with absolute supreme impartiality and did it fantastically. And that would be the average journo at the BBC. But it isn't the average journo that is the problem. It's it's like trying to define what a mindset is and groupthink and how these pervasive sort of elements of, it can happen in any workplace in different ways, how they kind of take hold, as it were. But no one can quite remember it being said out loud. It just sort of happened. We're in this place. Vernon in Staffordshire. Vernon, what have you got for us?
I have a solution, Ian.
A solution? I love this.
Yeah, I'm an adult, and we need to have an adult conversation. So politicians is probably the only profession where you don't need any qualifications.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, you've literally got lunatics running the asylum.
Yeah, good point.
4 million people that self-certify whether they can have benefits. My solution is this. I would give everybody on benefits 6 months' notice.
Mm-hmm.
In 6 months and 1 day, your benefits will stop. Other than the people who are medically certified that can't work, everybody else, even those with mental health problems, I'm very sympathetic to them. But you know what? If you go to work, you'll feel a lot better.
Yeah.
And if you can't pay for your children, guess what? Don't have it.
Yeah.
The two-child limit is there for a reason. If you want a third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, like I've got, guess what? You get up in the morning at 3 a.m., you leave at 4, and you get home at 8 o'clock. And if you can't pay for your children, that's not my problem. Get a second job, get a third job, get a fourth job.
Yep.
You have to pay for them.
You absolutely do. I can remember my dad working, 7-day weeks. He'd work weekends because he had jobs to do. He had two ways of looking at that. One, because he couldn't afford not to be doing it, but also he didn't want to let people down because he was a very decent man in that respect. And but he didn't want any medals for that. As far as he was concerned, that's what you do. It's not for somebody else to finance that.
But politicians who've achieved the square root of zero, they're running this country. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Politicians who've achieved diddly squat in life, they're spending my taxes here.
And particularly this government, Vernon, because the front bench, as far as we can tell, has literally no one with any. I mean, they've worked in other parts of politics, and they did the same things at university, but they've never run anything, and I find that, I don't know how you make that part of the, the job application, but I do find it suspicious that an entire government is made up of people who've never run anything. Listen, Vernon, I've got to run for no other reason than we're about to get the news and Peter Cardwell's coming in. Thank you, Vernon in Staffordshire. He gets the last word on all of this. The next word, however, comes on Drive, which is hosted this afternoon by, is it David Lammy? No, it's Peter Cardwell.
No, David Lammy's a bit busy looking for the missing prisoners, I think.
Well, he might be a bit busy joining the dole queue, the way things are going. I mean, we said it yesterday, I think, didn't we, that, even if, things predate your time in office, if you're the person whose name is on the tin, you have to take it. We had former Justice Minister with us on a little earlier. He was talking about David Gork, the story. He suddenly finds himself in that job as Justice Secretary, and bang, something big comes on the War Boys case, and you've got to deal with it. So you can't say, oh, it's the previous government that,
Well, it's a tough job. You've got to deal with what's in front of you. I know that from working at the Ministry of Justice myself, and it was a tough job, but it was very, very interesting working for the Lord Chancellor. It's a fascinating prisons are just absolutely fascinating. I went to Belmarsh and various other prisons as well. They did let me out, but no,
despite what the judge said.
Despite what the judge said, it's really interesting actually, because David Lammy might not be the only person looking for a new job. Keir Starmer is under a huge amount of pressure. This briefing war has got completely out of control. The man who broke the story is Patrick Maguire.